Chapter 992. Lu Haochang was frightened by Yun Mingzi's words. In fact, Yun Mingzi was not trying to scare Lu Haochang, but 800 years ago this kind of trick was very common. Perhaps Chu Xiu himself did not know that he used the people of Jianghu to support the crown prince in exchange for his own interests, which was actually very old-fashioned. After gathering all the officials, Lu Haochang told all these things to the officials of Eastern Qi. Finally, the officials of Eastern Qi also came to a conclusion. They agreed to the plan of Taoism. Yun Mingzi's words were not alarmist talk, but it was indeed very possible. In the past, when Eastern Qi and Northern Yan fought, Xiang Long relied on the power of Northern Yan Jianghu to turn the tables. But at that time, Xiang Long only relied on a group of scattered Northern Yan Jianghu forces. And now, Northern Yan had the support of the entire Hidden Devil clan, which was much stronger than before. Regardless of whether Chu Xiu had this intention or not, his existence was a threat. And the officials of Eastern Qi actually had their own thoughts. Lu Haochang sought stability in mediocrity, but it did not mean that the people of Eastern Qi imperial court did not have the ambition to expand their territory. They sat on the rich and powerful central plains, but watched the rise of Northern Yan, and could not do anything to West Chu. For them this was simply a shame and a waste. It was not easy for His Majesty to change his usual gentle attitude and was ready to take action. How could they refuse? When Eastern Qi was surging, Chu Xiu was still in a state of closed-door cultivation. Watching so many experts fight in the primitive demon cave for Chu Xiu, it was not small. But the battle between Zhong Xinxiu and Jun Wuxian was the most important, but Chu Xiu was embarrassed to find that he could not understand it. It was only at this moment that Chu Xiu came to a sudden realization. The connection between him and Dugu Weiwo was much closer than he had imagined. Dugu Weiwei's strength was not as good as Zhong Xinxiu's and Jun Wuxian's. After all, Chu Xiu was not a person of this realm. He could not be sure who was stronger or weaker, but at least they should be on the same level. Chu Xiu had seen several illusions related to Dugu Weiwa. Every time, he would be able to comprehend something from it. Even if he couldn't understand it, he would still be able to learn it. For example, the blade intent of the word, break. But watching the battle between Zhong Xinxiu and Jun Wuxian, Chu Xiu could only stare dumbfounded. There was nothing he could do. Of course, most of the martial artists present were dumbfounded. Even at Shang Tianliang's realm, he still couldn't understand the power of the battle between the two. This made Shang Tianliang constantly sigh after he came back. There was always someone stronger than him. Although his strength was several times stronger than when he was in LV2, he was still far from being complacent. At this moment, the door to Chu Xiu's seclusion chamber was suddenly knocked open. Mei Qinglian walked in with a dignified expression and said, Eastern Qi has deployed troops to the border and is preparing to attack Northern Yan. Chu Xiu waved his hand indifferently and said, Attack then attack. Haven't there been many conflicts between the two sides over the years? Before, with Xiang Long around, Eastern Qi did not dare to act. After all, Xiang Long's prestige was still there. But now that Xiang Long is dead, Eastern Qi will definitely stir up a wave of trouble. This is normal. Although I helped Xiang Li ascend to the throne, the Northern Yan court still belongs to him. I'm not his fighter. If he really can't hold on any longer, then it won't be too late to make a move. Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, There is something wrong this time. Eastern Qi has deployed troops to the border not only to attack Northern Yan, but also to attack you. Chu Xiu frowned and said, Me? What grudge do I have with Eastern Qi? Mei Qinglian said, You have no grudge with Eastern Qi, but you have a grudge with the righteous martial arts world. Do you know what slogan Eastern Qi used to launch a crusade against Northern Yan? They said that Northern Yan used you, a demon, to stir up chaos in the Northern Yan court and bring disaster to the people of the Northern Yan. They attacked Northern Yan to save the people of the Northern Land from the demon's wrath. Most importantly, this incident was started by Chunyang Dao sect and Real Martial Arts sect. The righteous martial arts world of Eastern Qi is full of support. Do you still think that this has nothing to do with you? Chu Xiu frowned. This matter, of course, had something to do with him. It should be said that they came for him. But Chu Xiu was very confused. What was wrong with Chunyang Dao sect and Real Martial Arts sect? Why did they have to attack him at this time? Logically speaking, Yi Xiaonan, who had obtained the demonic seed, should have attracted more hatred than him. Mei Qinglian said again, The Northern Yan court is waiting for you to attend a meeting. I guess they are panicking. Chu Xiu nodded. He did not have time to think too much and headed straight for the Northern Yan Palace. At this time in the Northern Yan Palace, besides Xiang Li, Xiang Chong, Beigong Bailey, and other members of the Northern Yan royal family, the military and other forces were also there. The army of Eastern Qi was pressing down on the Northern Yan. This was a very tricky matter for all the people in the Northern Yan. Although Northern Yan had won the war under the leadership of Xiang Long, this victory was actually only for himself. For Eastern Qi it was not a serious loss at all. In the end, Eastern Qi did not continue the war because they did not want to suffer too much damage. Moreover, Lu Haochang was a steady character. If Northern Yan tore off a piece of his flesh, then so be it. Anyway, they could not kill him. Now that Eastern Qi had made a comeback, it was unknown whether Northern Yan could stop them again. Seeing that official Chu Xiu had finally arrived, Xiang Li hurriedly said, "Official Chu, please take a seat. Regarding the matter of Eastern Qi, do you have any thoughts, Official Chu?" Xiang Li was panicking. He felt like crying, but no tears would come. It had not been easy for him to be the emperor. Before he ascended to the throne, he had gone through a bloody battle to get to this position. After becoming the emperor, Xiang Li did not have the time to enjoy power and other things. He had just ascended to the throne, and there were too many things for him to learn. He did not expect to be better than his father, Xiang Long, but he did not want to lose to Eastern Qi's Lu Haochang either. But before he could finish his work, the news that Eastern Qi was about to launch a large-scale attack came. This almost made Xiang Li cry. This was not the way to bully others. Xiang Long had been defeated by Eastern Qi for so many years, but none of them came to avenge him. Now, as soon as he became the emperor, they came to attack him. Picking the soft persimmon to bully? Xiang Chong snorted coldly and said, "Your Majesty, you're still asking him if he has any thoughts? Haven't you realized that Chu Xiu was the one who started this war? Diabolism is not tolerated in the pugilistic world. Chu Xiu had enjoyed enough glory in the pugilistic world and brought back a body full of hatred. In the end, the karma still fell on us Northern Yan." Although Xiang Chong had supported Xiang Li's ascension to the throne, and was even grateful that Chu Xiu did not take back his rights to the imperial worship hall, he still could not stand to see Chu Xiu. This was partly because of Xiang Long. Xiang Chong had never interacted with Chu Xiu before, but when Xiang Long was about to die, Xiang Long had spoken ill of Chu Xiu and was very wary of him. First impressions were the strongest. Coupled with his failure in the fight for the throne, it would be strange if Xiang Chong was friendly to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu sneered and said, "Your Highness, you have a guilty conscience. Think about it. Even without me, Eastern Qi would not have attacked Northern Yan. When the late emperor was still around, Eastern Qi did not dare to act rashly because of the late emperor's reputation. But now that the late emperor is gone, have you ever thought that Eastern Qi would not make a move? The Northern Yan is not as strong as Eastern Qi. They will definitely join forces with the Northern Yan pugilistic world like the late emperor. When that time comes, won't I have to make a move? Moreover, Eastern Qi has already suffered once. Will they suffer again? Eastern Qi will definitely make use of the power of Eastern Qi's pugilistic world. Dao sect is the national religion of Eastern Qi. Do you think Chunyang Dao sect and martial arts sect will not make a move? No matter how you think about it, the result will be the same. Why should I, Chu Xiu, be the scapegoat? Chu Xiu's words reversed the cause and effect. There was nothing wrong with what he said. Everyone felt that it made sense. In fact, they did think that Eastern Qi would make a move after Xiang Long's death. They even took precautions for a period of time. However, during that period, Eastern Qi did not make any moves. Who knew that just when they relaxed a little, Eastern Qi had already deployed their troops at the border? But in fact, Eastern Qi's attack on Northern Yan was Chu Xiu's fault. The people of Northern Yan thought too highly of Lv Haochang. His greatest wish in this life was to sit firmly on the throne of the emperor. He would sit there without any achievements or mistakes until he died. He would leave the unification of the world to the next generation. Therefore, even after Xiang Long's death, he only threw a big banquet and slept with 3 new beauties. He did not do anything else after that. If it was not for Yun Mingzi and the others' encouragement, Eastern Qi would not have made a move. Xiang Chong glared at Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu's words were so reasonable that he did not know how to refute it. Xiang Li hurriedly tried to smooth things over. "Uncle, Official Chu, both of you are doing this for the good of Northern Yan. It is not a matter of who is responsible. But now that Eastern Qi's army is approaching our borders, we have to come up with a solution no matter what." Hearing Xiang Li's words, Xiang Chong did not continue to target Chu Xiu. But at the same time, he did not have any good ideas. He had spent most of his life in the Imperial Worship Hall, practicing martial arts. He did not care much about other things. He could kill people, but he was really not good at other things. Therefore, Xiang Li turned his eyes to Chu Xiu. He had great confidence in Chu Xiu. After all, this man had been through several wars between the righteous and the demonic, and had stirred up countless storms in the Jianghu. No one would doubt Chu Xiu's strength, let alone his ability. Chu Xiu thought for a moment, then said in a deep voice, "Different situations call for different measures. It is no big deal. Don't forget, the Northern Yen now is much stronger than the Northern Yen of decades ago. Back then the Northern Yen was able to stop Eastern Qi. Why can't they do it now? Because of the involvement of the Jianghu, we have to deal with both the Jianghu and the battlefield at the same time. Leave the Jianghu to me and the battlefield to General Beigong. Moreover, the policies that the former emperor made for the Northern Yen are the most suitable for the Northern Yen. There is no harm in using them again." Xiang Li was puzzled. "What policies?" Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, "Combine vertical and horizontal." Chapter 993. Chu Xiu's interests were now linked with the Northern Yen. In addition, Eastern Qi was obviously targeting Chu Xiu. At this time, Chu Xiu did not hold back and gave his advice to the Northern Yen wholeheartedly. The Northern Yen could not resist Eastern Qi alone. To resist Eastern Qi, they had to unite all the forces that could be united. Although Xiang Li wasn't too smart, he wasn't stupid. He immediately reacted, "West Chu?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Yes, West Chu. Everyone knows that if the lips are gone, the teeth will be interdependent. As long as the Western Chu royal family is not an idiot, they should know what to choose at this time. Moreover, the former emperor is very far-sighted. He found the people of Jiangshan Pavilion and let them take over Wei Prefecture. They can also be used as a bridgehead to resist Eastern Qi. In this way, the three forces will be more powerful than 10 years ago." At this time, Xiang Li smiled bitterly and said, "Jiangshan Pavilion can't be counted on. Father is good at everything, but he miscalculated one thing, and that is Jiangshan Pavilion's shamelessness. Just now, news came that Jiangshan Pavilion has officially established a country in Wei Prefecture, called the State of Wei. But this State of Wei is not the State of Wei that favors our Northern Yen, but the State of Wei of Eastern Qi. These bastards betrayed us and chose to rely on Eastern Qi." When Chu Xiu heard this, he was only a little surprised, but not too surprised. Jiangshan Pavilion's choice was not strange. A good bird chooses a good tree to nest in. Jiangshan Pavilion knew what Northern Yen was thinking. It was nothing more than using them as meat shields to resist Eastern Qi. But now, Eastern Qi also promised Jiangshan Pavilion that they could establish a country, and Eastern Qi was more powerful than Northern Yen. In this case, what advantage did Northern Yen have? It should be said that when Xiang Long led Jiangshan Pavilion to Wei Prefecture, he should have thought of this. But he didn't know whether Xiang Long's brain was damaged before he died, or he overestimated the power of Northern Yen, which led to this result. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Everyone has the right to choose a side. Jiangshan Pavilion and Eastern Qi have their own reasons in the end. Now, it doesn't matter if Jiangshan Pavilion is one or two. It doesn't matter if Jiangshan Pavilion is one or two. It takes time to form alliances. During this period of time, we'll have to see if General Beigong can hold them off." Beigong Bailey said in a deep voice, "The 5 armies are ready to set off at any time. Don't worry, we aren't that useless. We won't be easily defeated by Eastern Qi." Xiang Chong was annoyed to see Chu Xiu giving orders, but he couldn't do anything about it. He wasn't good at this, and Beigong Bailey was a general. The battlefield was his real game. Xiang Li had just ascended the throne, and he was still in a daze. Xiang Chong might not even dare to carry out his orders. It could be said that Chu Xiu was the most qualified to speak about the world's situation. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "If that's the case, then choose someone with enough weight and eloquence to go to Western Chu and seek an alliance." "Who was the one who made the alliance between Northern Yen and Western Chu?" Xiang Chong said with a strange expression, "It was the poison dragon warrior Yang Gongdu, but he should be dead." Chu Xiu also had a strange expression on his face. Of course he knew that Yang Gongdu was dead and he had died right in front of him. That fellow might not be able to see the situation clearly, but he had a powerful mouth. If he made a move, it would be easy to convince Western Chu. Chu Xiu pondered for a moment before saying, "Then, Your Highness, you should go on this trip. This is a good errand, and Your Highness' status is sufficient." Xiang Chong's face was slightly red as he said, "This king isn't good with words. If I can't explain myself clearly, it will ruin things." Xiang Chong had spent most of his time cultivating in the Imperial Consecrator Hall, so he really couldn't handle this kind of task. Xiang Li suggested, "How about this? Official Chu and Imperial Uncle will handle this matter together. Uncle can represent the Northern Yen court, and Official Chu can represent the Northern Yen society. If the lips died, the teeth would be cold. If the West Chu court was finished, the West Chu Jianghu would not be easy to survive. After all, that was the area with the loosest management of the Jianghu. Official Chu Yu and moon-worshipping cults Yi Xiaonan are both from the demonic path. If you can convince the moon-worshipping cult to make a move, wouldn't that be even better? Chu Xiu looked at Xiang Li with a strange expression. He wasn't stupid, he had actually learned to draw inferences. Convincing a portion of the demonic path in Western Chu society to make a move wasn't a problem, but the other side was the moon-worshipping cult, so Chu Xiu didn't dare say he would succeed. It was best for the weak not to guess the thoughts of the strong because you haven't reached that level yet, so you don't know what the strong are thinking. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "No problem, but before we go to Western Chu, we still need to take care of the Northern Yan." Xiang Li was stunned and said, "What else does the Northern Yan need to take care of?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "The bald donkeys from the Great Light Temple are still in the north. If they suddenly make a move, we will be caught off guard. So, we need to take care of the Great Light Temple first before we go to Western Chu." Xiang Li immediately said, "Official Chu, how do you plan to take care of the Great Light Temple? The court will definitely cooperate." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "No need. This time I'm not going to fight the Great Light Temple to the death. I can take care of it in a short time." After all the arrangements were made, the Northern Yan court immediately began to move. When it came to a war that could destroy a country, no one dared to look down on it. Even the lowest soldier had his nerves stretched taut. Chu Xiu called for Shang Tianliang and the others to cause trouble for the Great Light Temple. However, when Chu Xiu went to hurt Shang Tianliang looked at Chu Xiu warily and said, "Brat, are you done yet? Do you really want to make use of this old man's remaining value completely? I can't beat the old monk Su Ci from the Great Light Temple. No matter what you say, I can't beat him." Chu Xiu smiled faintly and said, "Is City Lord Shang admitting defeat? A heaven and earth elemental enlightenment realm powerhouse is admitting defeat before the fight even starts. That's not nice to hear." Shang Tianliang snorted and said, "If I can't beat him, then I can't beat him. What's so embarrassing about that? The Great Light Temple's inheritance is right there. The old monk Su Ci's strength is probably even stronger than my Shang clan's ancestors. It's not embarrassing if I can't beat him." Perhaps because Shang Tianliang had grown up in Green Capital, he had never placed much importance on things like reputation and honor. To him, reputation and honor were not as important as a piece of cornbread. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Don't worry, I'm not asking you to risk your life this time. I'm just pulling you along to boost my momentum. With the Dao sect working together with Eastern Qi's army, how can I fight to the death with the Great Light Temple at this time?" Shang Tianliang looked at Chu Xiu suspiciously. "How could I not die if I went out with you?" Shang Tianliang was seriously doubtful about this. Also, he suspected that Chu Xiu's life was filled with malice, which was why his killing intent was so strong. He should ask Yuan Ji for help. However, with Master Yuan Ji's personality, even if he did, he would definitely say that Chu Xiu had an unparalleled immortal life providence. When Chu Xiu brought his people to the Great Light Temple, the Great Light Temple had also heard about the news about Eastern Qi. Eastern Qi had caused such a huge commotion that it had triggered a war. This was no longer just a storm in the pugilistic world. In the Great Strengths Hall, Su Yun frowned and said, "I've underestimated Ling Yunzi and Lu Changlu. I didn't expect them to be so generous." Yuan Guang said, "In my opinion, this isn't the decision of the two current sect masters. It's the handiwork of Yun Mingzi and Han Jusi. Yun Mingzi used to be the head of the 6 spiritual masters of the Chunyang Dao sect. He was the one who had the hope of taking over the position of sect master. Meanwhile, Han Jusi was the sect master of the true martial sect 800 years ago. Both of them have bad tempers, but at the same time, they are very decisive in their actions. Their plans are extremely generous." Hearing Yuan Guang say this, Su Ci and Su Yun looked at each other and nodded lightly without anyone noticing. It was fortunate that the Great Light Temple had sent out Yuan Guang, a senior who had retired 800 years ago. He did not fight for the position. Otherwise it would be troublesome. Su Jing said, "If that's the case, what should the Great Light Temple do? There's no news from the Dao sect." Yuan Guang smiled bitterly and said, "According to what I know about them, they won't send you any news. Especially Yun Mingzi. 800 years ago, the Chunyang Dao sect was very powerful. They were best at suppressing people with their power. Now that the Eastern Qi is ready, they are going to attack the Northern Yan imperial court that worships demons. The righteous and the demonic cannot coexist. Everything is in front of us. How can we turn a blind eye to it?" The few people present frowned. Indeed, the Tao sect not contacting them now was the most troublesome thing. Wasn't the Buddhist lineage also known as the supreme sect of the righteous martial arts world? Moreover, they wanted to annihilate the demonic path right at their doorstep. Yet they just stood there and watched. Even if the Great Light Temple had the nerve to do so, this would be one of the blemishes that they would be mocked by the Tao sect in the future. It would ruin their reputation. Just as everyone was still in a dilemma, a young novice monk suddenly walked in, looking slightly flustered. "Abbot. First seat. This is bad. Chu Xiu has brought a group of subordinates and is heading straight for the Great Light Temple. They're already up the mountain." Hearing this, everyone's expression darkened. Arrogant. Too arrogant. Now Chu Xiu still has a huge problem on his hands. We haven't even decided whether or not to find trouble with you, yet you dare to send yourself to our doorstep? Do you have a death wish? Just as everyone was about to leave, Su Jing suddenly said, "Senior Abbot, be careful." Su Ci nodded. He knew what Su Jing meant. Even if Chu Xiu combined all the forces in his hands, he would not be a threat to the Great Light Temple. However, Chu Xiu had taken the initiative to find trouble with the Great Light Temple before his own troubles came. Chu Xiu was either crazy or he had something to rely on. Based on Chu Xiu's personality, it was most likely the latter. Chapter 994. In front of the main entrance of the Great Light Temple, Chu Xiu's group of experts stood there arrogantly, as though they were on a sightseeing tour. It was not easy to observe the Great Light Temple of the Northern Buddhist sect at such a close distance. However, at this moment, the Great Light Temple's cultivators guarding the gate were looking at Chu Xiu and the others warily. Their faces showed that they were not afraid of death. Clearly, if Chu Xiu and the others dared to do anything like barging into the mountain gate, they would really dare to charge forward and risk their lives. The gate was slowly pushed open. Su Ci and the others walked out and looked at Chu Xiu unkindly. Su Yan was the first to say coldly, "Chu Xiu, what are you doing here at the Great Light Temple?" Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Your Temple of Great Light is not some dragon's lair or tiger's den, so why can't I come?" Su Yan snorted. "Chu Xiu, don't be sarcastic here. Taoism is working together with Eastern Qi to suppress the Northern Yen. You're in trouble now. Are you here at the Great Light Temple just to enjoy the scenery?" Chu Xiu's expression turned serious and he said in a low voice, "Master Su Yan is right. I am here at the Great Light Temple because of this matter." The people from the Great Light Temple were stunned. Taoism is working together with Eastern Qi to suppress the Northern Yen. What are you doing here at the Great Light Temple? Su Yan sneered. Are you here to tell us that Taoism and Buddhism are at odds with each other so that we can help you? If you have such thoughts, I advise you to go back. Although we read scriptures every day, we have not read to the point where our minds are muddled. Chu Xiu shook his head. Of course I want the Great Light Temple to do this, but unfortunately you won't. On the contrary, I am worried that the Great Light Temple will attack the Martial Suppression Hall. So today I came first. After all, it is better to attack first than to attack later. Hearing this, the people from the Great Light Temple wanted to break their vows and curse. They had never heard of such a ridiculous reason. Just because you are worried that the Great Light Temple will attack you, you came first. What is this? Persecutory delusion? There are always people who want to harm me? The Temple of Great Light was not the one who started this incident. In fact, they were still discussing whether or not they should make a move just now. They had yet to make up their minds. Su Ci said, "Chu Xiu, what are you trying to do? Just because of such a ridiculous reason, you personally brought your people and came to my Temple of Great Light in such an aggressive manner?" Chu Xiu said solemnly, "Abbot Su Ci, this reason isn't funny at all. On the contrary, it's very important. To fend off foreign aggression, we must first stabilize the internal situation. I am currently resisting Eastern Qi and Haoyan Taoism. If someone stabs me in the back, who am I going to ask for justice?" Chu Xiu's bold and confident words almost made Su Ci laugh in anger. "Then tell me, what is the meaning of your visit? Don't tell me you want to destroy the Great Light Temple prematurely?" Chu Xiu shook his head. "Of course not. The Bodhi Yard of the Great Light Temple has countless experts from the older generation. I can't destroy the Great Light Temple with just these few people. No one in the pugilistic world can destroy the Great Light Temple either. I'm here to ask for a promise from the Great Light Temple." "What promise?" Chu Xiu squinted. "A promise that in this incident the Great Light Temple will remain neutral and will not attack. We will also have to swear to Buddha. Monks don't lie, not to mention that I've made a vow to Buddha." Su Ci said coldly, "Impossible. The Great Light Temple will not give you any promises." "Chu Xiu, you're forcing the Great Light Temple again. Perhaps the Great Light Temple wouldn't have made a move before, but now the Great Light Temple doesn't mind making a move. Putting aside the fact that the Great Light Temple had not made up their mind to attack, even if they had made up their mind not to get involved, they would not give Chu Xiu any promises. Since when did the Great Light Temple, one of the Buddhist sects in the north and south, have to make a promise to someone from the demonic path? Chu Xiu's words completely infuriated Su Si. He took a step forward and his body shone with Buddhist light. That powerful aura shot into the sky, and one could vaguely hear the sound of Buddhist chanting in midair. The evil moon saber was held in Chu Xiu's hand, and the inner demon was suppressing the power of the evil moon saber. In that instant, a violent demonic aura swept through the sky. The sky was clear, but the shadow of a moon was reflected in the sky. It was a blood moon. Seeing the confrontation between the two, Shang Tianliang cursed in his heart. Like hell, I'll believe you. Previously, this Chu Xiu had promised him that he would not attack this time, but now he had come to provoke him. Wasn't he still going to attack? However, this time Chu Xiu did not attack directly. Instead, he suppressed the power of the evil moon saber and said with a smile, "Master Su Si, don't be so agitated. I've already experienced your martial arts in the primitive demon cave, and I don't want to experience it again. I'm not asking the Great Light Temple for this promise for free. I'm offering something in exchange." Seeing Chu Xiu restrain his saber, Su Si also restrained some of his power. He asked, "What are you offering?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "I'll use the lives of 27,396 Buddhist monks in the northern Yen kingdom to trade." "What did you say?" This time not only Su Si, but all the warriors from the Great Light Temple released a powerful aura, as if they wanted to swallow Chu Xiu alive. Chu Xiu said coldly, "Masters, don't be so agitated. How do you usually address me, Chu Xiu? Is it the demonic Dao villain? Since I've become a demonic Dao villain, I have to live up to this name. What is the demonic Dao? Despicable, shameless, cruel, murderous, committed all kinds of bad things and committed all kinds of crimes. Am I right? But this time I didn't provoke the Dao sect. In the end, not only did the Dao sect want to suppress me, but they also want to destroy the foundation that I've built in the northern Yen for so many years. My principle, Chu Xiu, is that whoever makes life difficult for me, I'll make life difficult for them. Next, I will use all my strength to face the pressure from Eastern Qi and the Dao sect. There can be no mistakes in the future. So, the Great Light Temple has to give me this promise, even if you don't want to. If you really don't give it to me with an order from me, the Blue Dragon Society's assassins in the northern Yen will immediately pluck the bald heads of 27,396 Buddhist monks in the northern Yen territory. The Great Light Temple will be responsible for all of this. Also, the Northern Yen court will issue a decree to exterminate the Buddhists in the Northern Yen territory. Anyone who believes in Buddhism will be exiled to the bitter cold of the far north. Anyone who secretly hides Buddhist scriptures will be punished with treason. Master Su Si, do you believe that in this way, there will be no trace of your Buddhist lineage in the entire Northern Yen within a month? When that time comes, all of you will be the sinners of the Buddhists. When Chu Xiu said this, everyone in the Great Light Temple turned pale. It was as if they wanted to skin Chu Xiu alive. Even Shang Tianliang looked at Chu Xiu in shock. This move was truly sinister. They had seen wicked people, but they had never seen someone so wicked. As the Great Light Temple was close to the Northern Yen territory, the Northern Yen Dao sect's influence was not strong. On the contrary, there were still some small temples. Although these people were not from the Great Light Temple, they were all disciples of the Buddhists. They came from the same source. That was the lives of more than 20,000 Buddhist disciples. How could the Great Light Temple ignore it? In addition, once the Northern Yen court issued the decree to exterminate the Buddhists, the foundation that the Great Light Temple had spent thousands of years building in the Northern Yen territory would be destroyed in a month's time. After a long while, Su Si squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. "Chu Xiu, don't you dare." Chu Xiu held his saber and said expressionlessly, "You'll see if I dare. Master Su Si, if you have the guts, then make a bet. Or you can leave me in the Great Light Temple right now. The choice is in your hands." Su Si, who had always appeared to be extremely calm, was so angry that his heart trembled. After a while, he gritted his teeth and said, "I swear to Buddha that during the time when Eastern Qi and Taoism are attacking Northern Yen, the Temple of Great Light will seal off the mountain. Not a single monk will come out. Are you satisfied now?" Chu Xiu put away his saber and smiled again. "Satisfied, of course I'm satisfied. Master Su Si, you're decisive. I'm impressed. If that's the case, I won't disturb you any longer. After that, Chu Xiu waved his hand and led his people down the mountain. After Chu Xiu and the others left, Su Yan was so angry that he was shaking. He could not even speak. Su Jing said coldly, "Shameless." Su Yun snorted and said, "They deserve to die." Yuan Guang sighed and said, 800 years ago, this poor monk had never seen such a shameless and despicable demonic cultivator. The morals of the world are degenerating and people are not what they used to be. 800 years ago, even the demonic cultivators had to follow the rules. Why has it become like this now? Beside him, Shudu pursed his lips and said, "Most people from the demonic path follow the rules. Chu Xiu is the only one who doesn't. Otherwise, why do you think he has such strength and influence at such a young age? Those who aren't as strong as him have been beaten to death. Those who aren't as shameless as him have been tricked to death by him." Su Ci said nothing with a dark expression. He only waved his hand and said, "Seal the mountain." This time the Great Light Temple would definitely suffer a loss. There was no point in saying anything more. Chu Xiu could be shameless but the Great Light Temple could not. They could not ignore the lives of the other monks, and the foundation of the Buddhist lineage in the northern Yen could not be lost either. Therefore they could only lower their heads. Meanwhile, at the foot of the mountain, Shang Tianliang shook his head slightly and said, "Chu Xiu kid, this move of yours is not just any ordinary sneaky move. Those monks from the Great Light Temple will definitely fight you to the death in the future. Moreover, you can only use this move once. I'm afraid it won't work a second time." The people of the Great Light Temple were not idiots. After this incident, they would definitely make arrangements for the Buddhist disciples in the northern Yen territory. They would not be threatened by Chu Xiu like this again. Moreover, after this incident, the Great Light Temple would definitely hate Chu Xiu to the core. If there was another opportunity like this, they would definitely not hesitate and would directly make a move. Chapter 995. Chu Xiu did not underestimate the Great Light Temple and knew the consequences of offending the Great Light Temple. However, for the current Chu Xiu, even if he did not completely offend the Great Light Temple now, it would be the same in the future. Hearing Shang Tianliang say that the Great Light Temple would definitely not rest until he was dead, Chu Xiu said lightly, "It doesn't matter. The righteous and the demonic are opposed. In the future, if I decide to return to the Kunlun Devil cult, the Great Light Temple will still want to tear me into pieces. Anyway, it will happen sooner or later. I just brought this matter forward." Shang Tianliang and the others thought about it carefully. What Chu Xiu said was quite reasonable. Anyway, there were many people in the pugilistic world who wanted to tear him into pieces. The Great Light Temple did not make much of a difference. After dealing with the Great Light Temple, Chu Xiu prepared to go to West Chu with Xiang Chong to meet the moon-worshipping cult and the West Chu royal family. This kind of matter did not require a lot of people, so the people from the Jinwu Hall, including Shang Tianliang, were arranged by Chu Xiu to stay in the northern Yen to deal with accidents. He and Xiang Chong went all the way to West Chu. Chu Xiu and Xiang Chong did not like each other, so the two of them did not communicate much along the way. Moreover, now that the situation had reached such a critical point, they did not have the mood to chat on the road. They rushed to West Chu as fast as they could. However, after arriving at West Chu, Xiang Chong wanted to find the West Chu royal family first, while Chu Xiu was prepared to find the moon-worshipping cult first. The two of them had a dispute on this point. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Your Highness, the last time the Northern Yen joined forces with West Chu to fight against Eastern Qi, how much effort did West Chu put in?" Xiang Chong frowned and said, "Last time the West Chu imperial court didn't play tricks. But with their strength, even if they didn't play tricks, their strength is still limited. So last time against Eastern Qi, it was our Northern Yen who was the main attacker. As for the West Chu imperial court, they mainly restrained the power of Eastern Qi. Why do you ask?" Chu Xiu softly said, "The West Chu court strength can be seen here. They can't be weak, but they can't be considered strong either. But the moon-worshipping cult strength is certainly strong enough. Moreover, your Highness should know the status of the moon-worshipping cult in the West Chu land. As long as he dealt with the moon-worshipping cult first, the West Chu imperial court would be much simpler. Moreover, your Highness, please don't forget that our opponents this time are not only Eastern Qi, but also the forces of the righteous martial arts world." Xiang Chong couldn't beat Chu Xiu in this matter. Since Chu Xiu said so, he had to agree to go to the moon-worshipping cult first. Chu Xiu had been to the moon-worshipping cult once before. It was during the war between the righteous and demonic forces. But that time, everyone just fought outside and didn't go inside to watch. This time, when Chu Xiu came after reporting his name, Dong Huang Tai, the moon-worshipping cult's high priest, and the moon-worshipping cult's saintess personally came to greet him. With Chu Xiu's current strength and status, he was qualified to receive this kind of treatment. Dong Huang Tai still had some injuries that hadn't healed. When fighting for the demon seed, he burned his blood essence to help Yi Xiaonan get the demon seed. This kind of consumption couldn't be recovered in a short time. As for the moon-worshipping cult's high priest, Chu Xiu didn't have many dealings with him, but he heard that he was low-key and mysterious. Among them, the one that Chu Xiu had the most dealings with was the moon-worshipping cult saintess. But after seeing her, Chu Xiu stared at her. Of course, Chu Xiu had never seen a beautiful woman before. He was just curious about the current state of the moon-worshipping cult saintess. She was actually still in the unity of heaven and man state. Most of the martial artists who entered the Longhu list with Chu Xiu had now stepped into the real pellet state. If it was someone else, it would be normal even if their strength was weak, but it was the moon-worshipping cult saintess. The moon-worshipping cult saintess chuckled and said, "Why is official Chu staring at me? Are you interested in me? If it's others, I will definitely refuse. If it's you, official Chu, I can consider it." Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Even if I want to, master, you won't be willing. The moon-worshipping cult's saintess won't be abducted by an outsider." After making a joke, Chu Xiu walked into the moon-worshipping cult under the lead of Dong Huang Tai and the moon-worshipping cult's high priest. Following behind Chu Xiu, Xiang Chong was a little upset. When he was in the Northern Yen, he didn't feel that he was worse than Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had the Zhenwu Hall, and he also had the Royal Consecrator Hall. Chu Xiu had the hidden demon lineage, and he was also the Northern Yen Lord. Chu Xiu was powerful. Although he couldn't defeat him with the 9-dragon seal, he still had the power to fight. But as soon as the result came out, the difference was obvious. Chu Xiu's current reputation was built by him. As a demon, even the moon-worshipping cult, the current leader of the demon, would not neglect Chu Xiu. In addition to Yi Xiaonan, the 3 high-level officials came out to greet him, and their attitude was also very polite. As for Xiang Chong, although he wasn't ignored, it was obvious that those in the moon-worshipping cult didn't take him seriously. As a Northern Yen Lord, what achievements did he have outside of the Northern Yen? The people of Jianghu recognized the fist, not the identity of the Northern Yen royal family. Xiang Chong followed Dong Huang Tai and the others into the moon-worshipping cult. The scenery along the way was extremely beautiful. The scenery was pleasant, and even some of the buildings were designed in a very novel way. It was as if they were one with the scenery, and Xiang Chong was slightly surprised. Previously, he always thought that the interior of a big demon sect like the moon-worshipping cult must be extremely gloomy. Who would have thought that it was like a paradise on earth? Moreover, the disciples of the moon-worshipping cult didn't have the gloomy feeling of ordinary demon martial artists. Instead, the men were handsome and the women were fair and beautiful. This made Xiang Chong secretly wonder. Could it be that the moon-worshipping cult chose disciples based on appearance first? At the sacred lake in the center of the moon-worshipping cult, Yi Xiaonan sat in a pavilion by the lake, waiting for Chu Xiu and the others. Previously, when Yi Xiaonan obtained the demon seed, Chu Xiu thought that he should be in a state of closed-door training. But now, it seemed that Yi Xiaonan wasn't in seclusion. Was he not in a hurry to refine the demon seed? As he thought about it, Chu Xiu and Xiang Chong walked over and cupped their hands. "Greetings, hierarchy." Yi Xiaonan looked at Chu Xiu, and Chu Xiu also looked at Yi Xiaonan. At this moment, both of them paused at the same time. This was the first time that Chu Xiu officially met the #1 demon in the world, and Yi Xiaonan had naturally heard of Chu Xiu's name. In fact, according to the standpoint of the two sides, the two should be hostile. However, with the pressure of the righteous sects, even if the demon lineage wasn't in the same camp, they wouldn't kill each other at this time. The two sides didn't have any hostility when they met. But at this moment, Yi Xiaonan suddenly said, "That stone that looks like a knife, what is it?" Dong Huang Tai felt embarrassed when he heard Yi Xiaonan suddenly ask such a question. Hierarchy was too straightforward. How could this kind of thing be asked face to face? Even if it was out of curiosity, it was good to beat around the bush. Moreover, why would Chu Xiu say it? Chu Xiu was also stunned when he heard Yi Xiaonan say this, but then he reacted. Yi Xiaonan didn't ask this because he coveted his stone knife, nor did it contain any other meaning. It was purely out of curiosity. Chu Xiu didn't believe in Yi Xiaonan's character, but he believed in Yi Xiaonan's pride. If Yi Xiaonan was really interested in the stone knife and wanted to snatch it, his first reaction would definitely be to directly snatch it instead of probing. With his strength, there was no point in being secretive like this. Therefore, Chu Xiu paused and said directly, "That is a knife embryo condensed from the dragon vein of the demon dragon." Only the rootless sacred flame can refine it into a knife. In the past, before Dugu Weiwei's listen to spring rain was refined, it was also this kind of knife embryo. Dong Huang Tai and the others suddenly gasped. They didn't expect that the seemingly unremarkable stone knife had such a great origin. It was actually an existence of the same origin as the demonic knife listened to spring rain. Of course, what surprised them even more was that Chu Xiu actually said it after Yi Xiaonan asked this question. They really couldn't understand these two people. Yi Xiaonan wasn't surprised. He just nodded and said, "So that's how it is." His curiosity had been satisfied. Moreover, not to mention that what Chu Xiu obtained was only a knife embryo, even if it was the complete listen to spring rain, Yi Xiaonan wouldn't be interested. The crescent blade in his hand was a magic weapon that he had personally forged. The tool spirit was unusually compatible with him. No matter how good listen to spring rain was, it wasn't his knife. "Why did you come to moon-worshipping cult this time?" Yi Xiaonan asked. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "I think you all already know what happened in Eastern Qi. The Dao lineage joined forces with the Eastern Qi imperial court to attack Northern Yin, but in fact their target is me. I didn't expect the orthodox lineage, especially the Dao lineage, to have this kind of courage. Therefore this time I also want to ask moon-worshipping cult to help." Yi Xiaonan didn't speak. He pondered for less than 3 breaths of time and only spat out a word, "Yes." Xiang Chong, who was standing to the side, stared with his eyes wide open. What was going on? Previously he was still thinking about how Chu Xiu should use his glib tongue to persuade Yi Xiaonan to help. In the end, Chu Xiu only made clear his purpose of coming, and the other party actually agreed. Wasn't this too simple? If he had known it was so simple, he probably wouldn't have needed Chu Xiu to come this time. He could have done it himself. East Emperor Tai and the High Priest also didn't expect Yi Xiaonan to agree so quickly. They were just about to say something when Yi Xiaonan knocked on the table and spat out 4 words, "Without the lips, the teeth will be cold." Yi Xiaonan agreed so quickly not because he didn't use his brain, nor because Chu Xiu had a big face, but because of these 4 words. In the past, when moon-worshipping cult was besieged by the orthodox martial arts world as a target, whether it was the time when the two sides joined forces at Fuyu, or when Yi Xiaonan went out of seclusion to attack the orthodox, although the Yinma lineage asked for some benefits, they also took action. This time, Yi Xiaonan agreed so quickly because of these 4 words. The bright devil and the hidden devil were both devils. This time they turned a blind eye. Next time they would be the unlucky ones. Chapter 996. As for Yi Xiaonan, it was very difficult for Chu Xiu to describe him. Although he came from the number 1 demonic path sect and had single-handedly raised the moon-worshipping cult to its current peak, in reality, Yi Xiaonan didn't have much of the demonic path style. In Chu Xiu's opinion, Yi Xiaonan wasn't ruthless enough or despicable enough. Of course, he wouldn't be indecisive or soft-hearted. In terms of doing things, he had always used the identity of the moon-worshipping cult's leader to carry out various plans with absolute rationality. However, when it came to being a person, he wasn't a sect master, nor was he a demon. If Chu Xiu were to insist, Yi Xiaonan should only be a martial artist, a pure martial artist. Perhaps it could be said that when one reached his realm, they were fully deserving of the title of powerhouse. Yi Xiaonan wasn't a martial maniac, but he was tireless in his pursuit of power. It was because of this that he was able to successfully cultivate the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra and become the number 1 demonic path cultivator. It was very difficult to become an opponent with such a person because the other party had no weaknesses. Unless you could completely defeat the other party in terms of strength, you wouldn't be able to defeat the other party. But it was much easier to become an ally with such a person. As long as you didn't play tricks and put the interests of all sides on the table, Yi Xiaonan would naturally make the most suitable choice for the moon-worshipping cult. Before coming to West Chu, Chu Xiu had already expected this. As long as he clearly said everything with Yi Xiaonan's personality, he would naturally know what to choose. But at this time Yi Xiaonan said, "The moon-worshipping cult will make a move, but the moon-worshipping cult will not leave West Chu." Xiang Chang's expression couldn't help changing. What was the point of not leaving West Chu? What was the difference between agreeing and not agreeing? But then Yi Xiaonan said, "Similarly, none of the righteous sects in the land of West Chu will leave West Chu." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "It is enough for the moon-worshipping cult to do this. This one is very grateful." Xiang Chong rubbed his head. Only now did he understand what Yi Xiaonan meant. There were quite a few righteous sects in West Chu. Just the Celestial Master Mansion was the biggest threat. There was also the Forgetting Sword Hut and the Storm Sword Tomb. Although the Chunyang Dao sect and the Real Martial Arts Order were the ones who started the fight, they were fighting in the name of killing the demons. It was hard to guarantee that the other righteous sects would not take action. This was also the reason why Chu Xiu had forced the Great Light Temple to make a promise. As long as the moon-worshipping cult could stop the righteous forces of West Chu, it would be a great help to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu said at this time, "That's right, this time I came to West Chu not only to ask the moon-worshipping religion to help, but also to contact the West Chu royal family. I also want to inquire about the relationship between the West Chu royal family and the moon-worshipping cult. Which side will they stand on?" Now that the two sides had decided to join forces, Dong Huang Tai and the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult treated Chu Xiu and his companion better. Hearing this, East Emperor Tai said, "West Chu royal family? That's hard to say. You know the situation in West Chu. The martial arts world is chaotic and the power of the imperial court is very weak. It is so weak that the words of the imperial court are not as effective as the big sects in the martial arts world. They even often ask us for help to deal with the martial arts world's affairs. So the relationship between the West Chu royal family and the martial arts world is not that tense. It should be said that they have a good relationship with everyone. The West Chu royal family's imperial astronomer is a priest from the Celestial Master Mansion. Every year the emperor will go to the Celestial Master Mansion to pray for blessings. If they were not afraid of offending the moon-worshipping cult, the West Chu royal family would be willing to let the Celestial Master Mansion become the national religion. But at the same time, the people of the moon-worshipping cult have some privileges in West Chu. Many of the imperial doctors in the palace are disciples of the moon-worshipping cult. Chu Xiu had a strange expression and said, "The disciples of the moon-worshipping cult are imperial doctors?" The high priest of the moon-worshipping cult laughed and said, "Official Chu, don't be blinded by a leaf. You need to know that voodoo can kill and also save people. The path of life and death is in your heart. Whether you kill or save, it all depends on how you want to use it." Dong Huang Tai waved his hand in disdain and said, "All right, don't talk about your useless theories." After rebuking the high priest, Dong Huang Tai turned to Chu Xiu and said, "Official Chu, if you want to go to the West Chu royal family, I can go with you. The West Chu royal family will give face to the moon-worshipping cult. Of course, it is up to you how to negotiate." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Then I will have to trouble Lord Dong Huang Tai." After the discussion, Chu Xiu and the others did not delay and followed Dong Huang Tai to West Chu's capital city, Jiangdu City. As the weakest of the three countries, Jiangdu City was not as good as the eastern Qi's Great Liang City and the northern Yan's Yanjing City. Although Jiangdu City was a capital city, it was not bad. But compared to the other two, it was much smaller. Dong Huang Tai said that he had some faith in the West Chu royal family. This was not an exaggeration. As soon as he entered the city, someone reported the news. Before Chu Xiu and the others could enter the city, a short and fat old man in brocade smiled and said, "Lord Dong Huang Tai, you haven't come to Jiangdu City for a long time. How come you have time to come today? Since you are here, don't be in a hurry to leave. Recently, my men caught a 7-colored golden pheasant in the 100,000 mountains. It is a rare treasure. Later, I will have someone add some mushrooms to stew it and we will have a good meal." The short and fat old man looked funny, but Chu Xiu could feel that he was also in the spiritual refinement realm. Of course, if he was not in the spiritual refinement realm, he would not dare to be friends with Dong Huang Tai and call him brother. At this time, when the short and fat old man saw Chu Xiu, his eyes narrowed. Obviously, he recognized Chu Xiu, but he said, "These two are." Dong Huang Tai said lightly, "The number one of the young generation in the demon path, the leader of the martial suppression hall, the official Chu Xiu who controls the northern Yen Jianghu. Haven't you heard of him? As for the other one, he is the leader of the northern Yen Imperial Consecration Hall, the northern King Xiang Chong of the northern Yen." Dong Huang Tai pointed at the short and fat old man and said, "This is the general of the Langia army, jade-faced flying dragon Yuan Fu." Hearing this name, Chu Xiu and Xiang Chong's expressions became extremely strange. They knew that the Langia army was the strongest army in the West Chu army. It was equivalent to the 5 armies of the northern Yen kingdom. Of course, there were 5 of the 5 armies of the kingdom, but West Chu only had one Langia army. But who would have thought that this funny-looking short and fat old man was the general of the Langia army? Wasn't his image a little too different? Most importantly, his nickname was Jade-Faced Flying Dragon, which was very funny. Flying Dragon was fine, but what if he was very fast? After all, size did not mean speed. But what the hell was Jade-Faced? How could this look be called Jade-Faced? Yuan Fu did not care about the looks of Chu Xiu and Xiang Chong. He just rubbed his hands awkwardly and said, "Do you want to see His Majesty?" Dong Huang Tai rolled his eyes and said, "If we don't want to see His Majesty, why did we come all the way to Jiangdu?" Yuan Fu laughed and said, "His Majesty has been a little tired recently, so it's not convenient for him to come. How about this, you can stay at my place for a night and I'll hold a welcoming dinner for you. After reporting tomorrow you can go see His Majesty." At this moment, Dong Huang Tai's eyes suddenly turned gloomy. "Yuan Fu, you and I are old friends. You can fool others but now you want to fool me? Don't play tricks with me. What is His Majesty doing?" Yuan Fu slapped his thigh and smiled bitterly. "Don't vent your anger on me. I have no choice. People from the Celestial Master Mansion, the Forgetting Sword Hut, and the Storm Sword Tomb are all here. If you go in again, won't you fight? I can only send you away first." Hearing Yuan Fu say this, Chu Xiao and Xiang Chong looked at each other and their hearts sank. There were many smart people in the martial world. What they could think of, others could also think of. The Celestial Master Mansion and other forces were in West Chu. Even if they thought of it late, they were the ones who got there first. Dong Huang Tai sneered, "Oh? You're all here. It's quite lively. How about bringing us along? Brother Yuan, don't worry. We'll give you face, but we'll do it inside the Imperial City." Hearing Dong Huang Tai say this, Yuan Fu could only bring them into the Imperial City. They didn't want to offend people from the righteous path, so they naturally didn't want to offend people from the demonic path either. At this time in the Imperial Palace, a middle-aged man wearing a dragon robe sat at the top. Below him sat 3 people. One of them was the Celestial Master Mansion's senior Qin. Beside him stood Shen Longzi. Actually, the Celestial Master Mansion didn't want to get involved this time. It was just that Eastern Qi was making more and more noise. The Celestial Master Mansion was one of the 3 great Taoist sections. The other 2 sects had already raised the banner of killing demons. If the Celestial Master Mansion didn't do anything, it wouldn't be good. The other 2 were Yan Ji of the Storm Sword Tomb and Shin Baochen of the Forgetting Sword Hut. Their goal was simple. They wanted to test the West Chu royal family's attitude. If the West Chu royal court was with the righteous path, they would be like a tiger with wings. But on the other hand, if the West Chu royal court was with the demonic path, they would have to kill this idea as soon as possible. The West Chu Emperor, Meng Yunqing, was a middle-aged man with a scholarly appearance. He didn't have the domineering aura of an emperor. Instead, he had a scholarly aura. Among the current emperors of the 3 countries, Meng Yunqing wasn't the most mediocre one. He had the same ambition as Xiang Long. But it was a pity that the Northern Yan still had some foundation. With their West Chu country's power, no matter how ambitious Meng Yunqing was, no matter how strong he was, he couldn't change the situation. Now that they could ensure the West Chu dynasty's inheritance, it was already because of the ancestors' protection. Chapter 997. Meng Yunqing was having a headache. Originally, this was just a dispute in the pugilistic world. As the West Chu emperor, he had no right to be involved. However, now that Eastern Qi had joined the fray, he was in a dilemma. Especially when the 3 sects were asking him about his stance, how would he know what his stance should be? Hence, Meng Yunqing said perfunctorily, "I know why the 3 of you are here. However, this matter needs to be discussed at length. Why don't the 3 of you rest for a while? I will inform the 3 of you when the discussion is done. What do you think?" Shin Baochen said plainly, "Your Majesty, do we need to discuss this matter at length? We just want to know if your Majesty is going to stand on the side of the righteous path or the diabolism. That is enough. We also believe that your Majesty will make the right choice." Before Meng Yunqing could speak, Dong Huang Tai snorted coldly, "Standing on your side is the right choice. Otherwise it is the wrong choice? Shin Baochen, since you have spoken, what else can the others say? You are not letting your Majesty choose, you are forcing your Majesty to make a choice." Seeing Dong Huang Tai and Chu Xiao walk into the hall, the few present frowned. The diabolism's reaction was not slow. They had caught up to West Chu so quickly. Chu Xiao said plainly, "Everyone, this matter has nothing to do with the 3 of you. The Chunyang Dao sect and the real martial arts sect did not care about the common people and started a war. When the time comes, the people will be plunged into misery and suffering. They will have to bear the consequences. Do you want to bear the consequences too?" Shin Baochen shook his head and said, "Chu Xiao, the one who really did not care about the common people is you. Do you really think the whole pugilistic world doesn't know what you did in the Northern Yen? Killing wantonly, suppressing the dissidents. The whole Northern Yen pugilistic world is trembling under your knife. The huge Northern Yen has become a den of demons. The people are plunged into misery and suffering today in exchange for peace in the future." Chu Xiao laughed coldly and said, "What a joke. You're not a Northern Yen man, so what right do you have to speak up for those Northern Yen forces? If it wasn't for me keeping an eye on them, they would have killed more people than I did. Once a hero pulls out his sword, it will be another 10 years of calamity for the common people. All of you are heroes and all of you want to be heroes. However, little do you know that the ones who bring calamity to the world are you, the heroes who claim to be righteous. That senior Qing of Mount Longhu stood up and said indifferently, solitary yin does not grow, solitary yang does not grow. Chu Xiu, you are also proficient in my Taoist martial arts, so you should know what these words mean. The righteous and demonic paths need to find a balance. Right now your demonic path is glorious enough. In the past few righteous and demonic wars, you demonic Dao always had the upper hand. In the primitive demon cave, the ones who benefited were your demonic Dao. If we let you go on like this, are you going to go to Kunlun Mountain and rebuild the devil cult in the future? Chu Xiu looked at the sleepy senior Qing and really wanted to say yes. However, before he could speak, Dong Huangtai sneered, yes my ass. Old Taoist, your Mount Longhu was forced by the cult master to seal off your mountain for a year, and now you still have the face to meddle in these things. Another day when the cult master comes to your Mount Longhu, will you behave yourself? Senior Qing's sleepy eyes opened wide and revealed a trace of coldness. Dong Huangtai, do you really think my celestial master mansion is afraid of your moon-worshipping cult? Last time the old celestial master didn't want people to die, so he showed mercy and didn't fight head-on. Do you really think Yi Xiaonan is #1 in the world? Dong Huangtai sneered. So what? The sect master's demonic might is unrivaled, but your Mount Longhu only has you 2 old men to support it. When the 2 of you kick the bucket, I will slaughter your celestial master abode sooner or later and turn your Mount Longhu into a snake-cat mountain. Both in West Chu, the celestial master mansion was the strongest of the righteous sects, and the moon-worshipping cult was the strongest of the demonic sections. The grievances between the 2 sides were endless, so Dong Huangtai didn't hold back when he spoke. On the other side, Meng Yunqing saw that both sides were about to fight, so he hurriedly advised, calm down you two. Let's talk this out. However, as an emperor, his presence was extremely low, and the people on both sides didn't listen to him at all. Senior Qing threw away the cane in his hand, and lightning flashed around him. A thunder god Dharma idol appeared behind him. Dong Huangtai, you're courting death. I gave you some face, but you still dare to open a dye shop? Even if I kick the bucket one day, I will still drag you down with me. As soon as he finished speaking, Senior Qing directly rushed towards Dong Huangtai, the purple heaven thunder in his hand shining. How did that power seem like someone who was about to die? Dong Huangtai sneered, then this lord will send you down first. Boundless black demonic flames rose, and the power of the burning sky mirror had been exerted to the extreme by Dong Huangtai. Even though he hadn't completely recovered from the loss of vitality in the primitive demon cave, it didn't affect his combat power at this time. Although the 2 of them fought, they were still restrained. They didn't directly blow up Meng Yunqing's palace, but directly rushed out of the palace and fought fiercely outside. Xian Longzi looked at Chu Xiu at this time and he said, Official Chu is now famous in the martial world, but last time, you and I didn't fight to our heart's content. This time, you and I both stepped into the real fire spirit refinement realm. I want to see Official Chu's true strength. In the past, Xian Longzi had fought with Chu Xiu once, but at that time Chu Xiu was only a half-step real pellet realm, and he was a real pellet realm. It could be considered as bullying the weak. As a result, he couldn't suppress Chu Xiu, and he was interrupted by Chu Wuji halfway. Now he had stepped into the real fire spirit refinement realm not long ago, and Chu Xiu had even caught up and stepped into the real fire spirit refinement realm earlier than him. Xian Longzi didn't have any jealousy, but he was very interested in Chu Xiu. As his voice fell, Xian Longzi's figure moved, and he rushed towards Chu Xiu. His figure turned into a lightning and his speed was extremely fast. In the past, when Chu Xiu faced Xian Longzi's terrifying speed, he couldn't even see the opponent's figure with the heaven's sun gazing at air technique. Now Chu Xiu didn't care about any speed. He condensed the annihilation fire around him, and he slapped Xian Longzi away. Lightning exploded, and the lightning around Xian Longzi condensed into a liquid that revolved around his body, extinguishing the world-extinguishing flames that were like maggots in his bones. Although he suffered a loss, Xian Longzi still laughed loudly and said, "Ha! Awesome." With a loud roar, Xian Longzi rushed towards Chu Xiu again, and the 2 fought outside the hall again. Shen Baochen and Yan Ji looked at each other. Since they were fighting over there, they certainly couldn't be idle, so they rushed towards Xiang Chong together. In fact, they didn't know who Xiang Chong was. As a prince of the Northern Yan and the person in charge of the Imperial Consecration Hall, Xiang Chong was very famous in the Northern Yan. However, outside of the Northern Yan he was just a nobody. However, in Xin Baochen and Yan Ji's opinion, regardless of who the other party was, anyone who was so close to people like Chu Xiu and Dong Huangtai was definitely a demon. They just had to fight. At the sight of this, Xiang Chong cursed inwardly as he frantically defended himself. Since he came in he hadn't said a word. Why did he have to be beaten? Most importantly, Dong Huangtai and Chu Xiu were fighting one-on-one. If it was me, why is it a siege? Don't you have any shame? The few of them fought all the way to the outside of the palace. The power directly attracted all the experts in the palace, but unfortunately no one dared to stop them. West Chu was not strong. In the entire West Chu royal family or even the West Chu court, the strongest person was only Yuan Fu, who was in the true fire spirit refinement realm. He was about the same level as Xiang Chong and could not be compared to Chu Xiu or Dong Huangtai. At this time in the field, everyone had already exchanged a few blows. Although it was chaotic, it was still clear who had the upper hand and who was at a disadvantage. Dong Huangtai's side was obviously at a disadvantage. Senior Qing from Longhu Mountain looked like he was going to die no matter how you looked at it. However, his strength was extremely shocking. His strength was unfathomable, and the exquisiteness of his attacks was accumulated through countless battles. In addition, Dong Huangtai's injuries from burning his blood essence had not yet healed, so he was at a disadvantage. As for Chu Xiu's side, he completely had the upper hand. Shen Longzi was the most talented person in the generation of the Celestial Master Mansion. If it was not for his personality that often went crazy, perhaps the person in charge of the Celestial Master Mansion would be him. After entering the true fire spirit refinement realm, Shen Longzi's strength was even more shocking. His speed was extremely fast, and his body could even transform into the thunder of heaven and earth. Before his voice even arrived, he was already there. With a casual strike, the 5 thunder execution fell like a thunderstorm. The power was simply shocking. However, no matter how shocking the power was, it could not withstand the extreme power. The peerless heavenly saber's damage was too serious. To use the evil moon saber, one had to rely on the heart demon to suppress the weapon spirit. There was too little time, so Chu Xiu directly used his body to fight Shen Longzi. No matter how fast Shen Longzi was, as long as he came into contact with Chu Xiu's world-extinguishing flame, he would immediately retreat far away and use his own strength to resist the power of the world-extinguishing flame. As long as Chu Xiu's fist flew over, Shen Longzi would have to use all his strength to resist. After all, he had just entered the true fire spirit refinement realm. In terms of power, he was completely suppressed by Chu Xiu. The most unlucky person was Xiang Chong. He really could not hold on much longer. Although Yan Ji had also entered the true fire spirit refinement realm not long ago, his talent was extraordinary. He had merged with the divine weapon Yan Ji from a young age, so his strength was definitely not weak among the 5 sword sections. As for Xin Baochen, he was even more terrifying. The leader of the sword hut was in the prime of his life and was still very young. It could even be said that among the 5 sword sects, he had the greatest hope of entering the mysterious heaven and earth realm. Furthermore, by relying on some external objects, Xin Baochen could even directly exchange blows with existences in the mysterious heaven and earth realm. Right now, it was much easier to deal with Xiang Chong without the 9 dragon seal. Under their combined attacks, Xiang Chong was already vomiting blood after a few moves. Chapter 998. A total of 7 true fire spirit refinement realm experts were fighting in the West Chu Imperial Palace. Even though they had restrained their strength, they still managed to destroy the entire palace's array. Meng Yunqing finally couldn't take it anymore. He angrily shouted, "Stop! All of you stop!" This was the West Chu Imperial Palace and he was the West Chu Emperor. In the end, this group of people were fighting in front of him. Was there still any law? Were they not putting him in their eyes? This was too much of a bully. Meng Yunqing was the emperor after all, and these 2 groups of people needed his help. Seeing that Meng Yunqing was truly angry, both sides could only stop. Xiang Chong saw that Xin Baochen and Yan Ji had retreated and he let out a sigh of relief. If they had continued fighting, he would have died here. At this time, Yuan Fu was staring at Dong Huangtai. Who would believe you? Who was the one who said they wouldn't fight? Dong Huangtai sensed Yuan Fu's gaze. He shrugged and pointed at Senior Qing, implying that he would only promise that he wouldn't attack, but if that old man wanted to cause trouble for him, he couldn't just let himself be captured, could he? Meng Yunqing let out a long sigh and said, "I say everyone, can't we just talk things out? Why do you have to fight? My West Chu is a small country and you want to force this emperor to take a side. This emperor doesn't know what to do. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, I know this is difficult for your majesty, so I won't make any promises. I just want to ask your majesty a few questions. Meng Yunqing was stunned and said, Official Chu, please speak. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, Between the righteous and demonic sects, your majesty doesn't need to consider the matters of the pugilistic world. The pugilistic world is the pugilistic world and the court is the court. I just want to ask your majesty, without considering the righteous and demonic sects, if Eastern Qi attacks the Northern Yin, will West Chu help or not? Meng Yunqing immediately said, Help. Of course we have to help, the teeth are cold without the lips. If the Northern Yin is destroyed with our West Chu's strength, we will be destroyed within 3 months with 100% certainty. Meng Yunqing was very clear about his own power. Sometimes the Northern Yin called themselves the Great Yin and sometimes the Eastern Qi called themselves the Great Qi. Only West Chu, whether it was internally or externally, would always call themselves West Chu. They had never called themselves the Great Chu because they knew that with West Chu's power, they could not afford to be called great. Chu Xiu asked again, Then your majesty, do you think that Eastern Qi will be coerced and controlled by the Jianghu forces after so many years of dealing with Eastern Qi? Meng Yunqing thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, Of course not. As the overlord of the Central Plains, the Eastern Qi Imperial Court, the Eastern Qi Imperial family is definitely not weak. And Lord Chu, to put it bluntly, don't think that you're the supreme leader of the martial arts world in the land of Northern Yin, ruling over the Jianghu of Northern Yin. But in the Northern Yin Imperial Court, you don't have the final say, do you? You can support a direct descendant of the Xiang Imperial family to ascend to the throne, but don't even think about supporting a branch to ascend to the throne. Only when what you do does not cross the bottom line of the Northern Yin Imperial Court, and is in line with their interests, will there be no conflict between you two. Otherwise, the Northern Yin Imperial family will not allow the power to fall into the hands of an outsider, even at the cost of a life-and-death struggle. Hearing Meng Yunqing's words, Xiang Chong couldn't help but puff out his chest. As an emperor, Meng Yunqing could see these things clearly, even more clearly than Xiang Chong. This time, when Chu Xiu helped Xiang Li seize the throne, it was within the bounds of the rules. That was why he could succeed and gain the approval of the entire Northern Yin Imperial Court. But if he did not follow the rules and supported a person who was not qualified to ascend to the throne, or an outsider to ascend to the throne, he would definitely suffer the backlash of the entire Northern Yin Imperial family and the Imperial Court, even to the point of a life-and-death struggle. After he finished speaking, Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, If that's the case, then why is your majesty still hesitating? Has your majesty not seen the cause and effect of this? Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Meng Yunqing's expression changed slightly. Clearly he had thought of something. Meng Yunqing was not a mediocre person. On the contrary, he was much smarter than Lu Haochang and more daring. It was just that Western Chu was inherently weak. Even if it was a hero like Xiang Long, he would not be able to reverse the situation. Therefore, after careful consideration, Meng Yunqing understood the meaning of Chu Xiu's words. If Eastern Qi attacked Northern Yin, Western Chu would not sit idly by, just like the war between the three countries. No matter what promises Eastern Qi made, Western Chu would not believe them. On the contrary, if Northern Yin was more powerful than Eastern Qi, then Western Chu would help Northern Yin. This time, Meng Yunqing was hesitant because it was not only because of the interests and grudges between the three countries, but also because of the Jianghu, as well as the conflict between the Orthodox and the Devil. That was why Meng Yunqing was so hesitant. But Chu Xiu's second question reminded him that the Jianghu was the Jianghu, and the Imperial Court was the Imperial Court. The two could work together, but they should also look at each other separately. The Orthodox martial arts world could not influence the decisions of the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. Now both sides were working together because they had a common goal. The Orthodox martial arts world wanted to destroy Chu Xiu, the Devil, and Eastern Qi was coveting Northern Yin. If Western Chu did not intervene this time and allowed Eastern Qi to destroy Northern Yin, then Eastern Qi's next target would be Western Chu. Just like what Meng Yunqing said at that time, Western Chu would not even last for 3 months. Don't be fooled by the righteous sect's high-sounding words, like they were worried about the common people and were afraid that people would be plunged into misery and suffering. But once Eastern Qi attacked Western Chu, let's not talk about whether they would intervene. Even if they really wanted to intervene, would Eastern Qi listen to them? Would they stop their footsteps to unify the world? Even if Lu Haochang was fatuous, even if he was an idiot, Would he stop if he was only half a step away from unifying the world and accomplishing the great feat that Eastern Qi's previous emperors had failed to achieve? At that time, other than surrendering, Western Chu would have no other way out. Never put your future in the hands of others. Meng Yunqing was very clear about this point. After a long while, Meng Yunqing let out a long sigh and said to Senior Qing and the others, "Everyone, I'm sorry. Western Chu does not want to intervene in the martial arts world's disputes, nor do we want to interfere in the feud between the orthodox and the evil. But Eastern Qi is Western Chu's archenemy. If the lips are gone, the teeth will be interdependent. I know this. So if Eastern Qi sends troops to Northern Yen, Western Chu will also send troops to Eastern Qi." Without waiting for Senior Qing and the others to continue, Meng Yunqing said in a low voice, "Yuan Fu." Here. Yuan Fu immediately straightened his plump body and stepped in front of Meng Yunqing at an extremely fast speed. From tomorrow onwards, Langya army will immediately move to the border of Eastern Qi. At the same time, gather the Western Chu army and send troops to Eastern Qi. Hearing Meng Yunqing's words, Senior Qing and the others all shook their heads. As the Western Chu emperor, Meng Yunqing still had this bit of decisiveness. Once he decided on something, he would not change his mind. Moreover, they were all sects from Western Chu and usually had a good relationship with the Western Chu imperial court. Naturally, they knew Meng Yunqing's difficulties. This time, Meng Yunqing could not be blamed for choosing to stand on the side of the evil. He only chose to stand on the side of Northern Yen. If there was anything to blame, it could only be said that Eastern Qi was too strong. Anyone would feel threatened by it. So when they heard Meng Yunqing's decision, they did not say anything harsh. They just cupped their hands and left. Of course, they still did not have a good attitude towards Chu Xiu, Eastern Emperor Tai, and the others. After Senior Qing and the others left, Meng Yunqing turned to Chu Xiu and the others and said amiably, "This is official Chu's first time coming to Eastern Qi. We will order people to prepare a banquet to entertain you." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Many thanks for your Majesty's kindness, but Eastern Qi's army has already arrived. Perhaps they have already started fighting. Time is of the essence and we must go back to support them." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Meng Yunqing did not insist and let Chu Xiu and the others leave first. After everyone had left, Meng Yunqing suddenly slumped down on the dragon throne, looking extremely exhausted. "Your Majesty." Yuan Fu hurried to greet him. Meng Yunqing shook his head and said, "We are fine. We just feel a little sad. The battle between the righteous and demonic factions, the struggle between Eastern Qi and Northern Yen, clearly has nothing to do with our West Chu, but every time it involves our West Chu soldiers and generals." Chu Xiu has a saying that has spread far and wide in the pugilistic world. In the pugilistic world, being weak is a sin in itself. This saying is also suitable for our West Chu. Being weak is a great sin. We do not ask for our West Chu to unify the world. We only ask for our West Chu to one day be recognized by everyone and not be reduced to a foil in every war. We don't even have the right to choose whether to fight or not. Seeing Meng Yunqing's emotional expression, Yuan Fu also sighed. He was an old man in the West Chu court. In his early years he was a bandit in the pugilistic world. When he was seriously injured, he was rescued by the previous emperor. Since then he had been loyal to the Meng family. He had watched Meng Yunqing grow up. He knew that the emperor's ability and wisdom were definitely not bad. He even felt that the emperor was not inferior to the current world's hero, Xiang Long. The only difference was that Xiang Long had the leeway to display his abilities, while Meng Yunqing did not even have the leeway to display his abilities. But this was also the sorrow of a small country. They had no choice but to go with the flow. It was just like what Chu Xiu had said. Being weak was a sin to begin with. Being able to survive was already something that one should thank the heavens and earth for. At this time, Chu Xiu did not know that Meng Yunqing was so emotional because of his words in the past. He did not have time to waste. He and Xiang Chong rushed back to Northern Yen as fast as possible. But before they reached Northern Yen, they saw the Northern Yen military waiting for them at the border. They told them that Eastern Qi had begun to attack. And this attack was from all directions. The border between Eastern Qi and Northern Yen, the Guanzhong torture room, and the Wei County were attacked at the same time. Among them, the Guanzhong torture room was about to collapse. Chapter 999. The Guanzhong torture room was located in the middle of the Three Kingdoms. In every war between the Three Kingdoms, the Guanzhong torture room had always been the unluckiest. But this time, the Guanzhong torture room had truly suffered an undeserved calamity. If not for Chu Xiu, Eastern Qi would not have attacked from the direction of the Guanzhong torture room. The two kingdoms had many other borders, including Wei County. But now, everyone knew that the nominal head of the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Yuanxing, was actually a puppet. The real ruler of the Guanzhong torture room was still Chu Xiu. So naturally, the Guanzhong torture room became one of the three major Eastern Qi attack sites. In less than 3 days, the Guanzhong torture room had fallen more than half, pushed to the gates of Guanzhong. At this time, tens of thousands of soldiers had surrounded the Guanzhong torture room. The east side of the city had the most soldiers, and in the center was a huge chariot. At this time, there was a middle-aged man in armor lying lazily on the chariot. He was holding a glass of wine and had a mustache. He didn't look like he was here to fight. Instead, he looked like he was here to watch a show. But this man was no ordinary person. He was General Nangong Weiyu of the Eastern Qi Imperial Guard. Among the 9 armies of the Eastern Qi, the Imperial Guard could be ranked in the top 3. The military system of the Eastern Qi was similar to that of the Northern Yan. The only difference was that the Northern Yan only had the 5 armies of the state, while the Eastern Qi had the 9 armies of the Northern Yan. Of course, because of the vastness of Eastern Qi's territory, the 9 armies were only stationed at the 9 important borders of Eastern Qi. Apart from wars of annihilation, it was not easy to gather all of them. Nangong Weiyu and Beigong Bailey were old rivals. Even their names were in direct opposition to each other, as if they were born to be rivals. Last time, when Eastern Qi attacked Yan and Chu, Nangong Weiyu had suffered some losses against Beigong Bailey. This time he wanted to save some face, but he didn't expect the higher-ups to send him to attack the Guanzhong torture room. This made Nangong Weiyu a little unhappy. It was too easy. At this moment there were 2 people standing beside Nangong. One of them was the Chunyang Dao sect's Mako Mori, and the other was the White Tiger Hall's master, Helian Changfeng. 3 true fire spirit refinement realm experts and the entire Imperial Guard were enough to take down a Guanzhong torture room. Mako Mori frowned. General Nangong, can we give the order to attack the city? You set up the formation but you're drinking here. What is the meaning of this? Nangong Weiyu glanced at Mako Mori without saying a word. This made Mako Mori even angrier. General Nangong, what is the meaning of this? Nangong Weiyu put down his wine glass and snorted. Do you have a problem with me, Taoist? Of course I do. The Chunyang Dao sect sent me here to assist you, General, but you're stalling for time here. A thunderous strike can kill these demonic cultivators when they're caught off guard. If this drags on, what if something unexpected happens? Nangong Weiyu clapped his hands. Taoist, you're right. Alright, you'll be the general. You'll be in command. You do it. As he said this, Nangong Weiyu actually stood up and was about to leave. Helian Changfeng, who was watching the show at the side, hurriedly pulled him back. Brother Nangong, Taoist Mako Mori doesn't mean that. Don't be angry. We people of the pugilistic world don't understand military formations. You can explain it to Taoist and he'll understand, right? Mako Mori was also trembling with anger. He had never seen such a reckless person before. He was simply impervious to everything. However, for the sake of the Chunyang Dao sect's plan, he forcefully held it in and didn't say a word. Nangong Weiyu snorted coldly. Don't give orders blindly if you don't understand. I hate amateurs guiding experts the most. I'm not as good as you Taoists at chanting scriptures and drawing talismans, but am I not good at military formations? Do you know how many people have gathered in the entire Guanzhong city? Nearly 100,000 warriors of the Guanzhong torture room are among them. Previously, we didn't encounter any decent resistance in other places. That's because the Guanzhong torture room has already transferred the elites of the Guangdong, Guannan, Guanxi, and Guanbei regions to the Guanzhong city. That's nearly 100,000 warriors. They're all constables and constables who have seen blood on their hands. Although they aren't part of the military formations, they aren't weak either. I have the confidence to win, but what about after that? That's nearly 100,000 warriors, not 100,000 pigs. If they just charge in like this, how many losses will the Imperial Guard suffer? These people are my comrades. Even if you don't feel sorry for them, I will. Helian Changfeng smiled. I see. But Brother Nangong, why are you dragging it out like this? Do you have a plan? Nangong Weiyu squinted his eyes. Have you heard of eagle endurance? You haven't experienced the pressure of a great army. No matter how strong a person is, they won't be able to withstand that kind of pressure. If I attack directly, the other party might rely on their bravery and fight to the death, causing great losses to the Imperial Guard. But when I've exhausted their bravery and only fear is left, then it'll be much easier. An unsheathed blade isn't scary. A blade hidden in a sheath is the scariest. Hearing Nangong Weiyu's explanation, Helian Changfeng and Mako Mori finally understood what he meant. In fact, these warriors from the Jianghu really didn't think as much as Nangong Weiyu, who came from the military. In a battle to the death between sects, even if it's two large sects with more than 10,000 people, they would often swarm in together. It was a battle of overall strength, so there weren't many twists and turns. At this time, Mako Mori suddenly thought of something. He suddenly said, "Oh right, in the Guanzhong torture room, anyone can die, but it's best to leave Chu Yuanxing alive." He was bewitched by Chu Xiu because he had no choice. The Guanzhong torture room is not wrong. The one who is wrong is that devil Chu Xiu. It had to be said that the reputation of the great hero Chu Kuanga was still very useful in the Jianghu. Even an old man like Mako Mori admired Chu Kuanga's deeds. Although there were many people in the Jianghu who were stronger than him, no one had the face to question Chu Kuanga's title. Chu Yuanxing was Chu Kuanga's only son. Even if he was standing on Chu Xiu's side and was their enemy, Mako Mori still wanted to keep him alive. Nangong Weiyu muttered and said impatiently, "Okay, got it." Mako Mori didn't hear what Nangong Weiyu muttered, but Helian Changfeng on the side heard it. What Nangong Weiyu said was clearly to be a whore and to build a chastity. At this time in Guangzhong City, everyone was indeed in a panic as Nangong Weiyu expected. Chu Yuanxing sat on the main seat. He barely kept calm and said, "Haven't they attacked the city yet?" Guangdong Penal Officer Xiao Yi shook his head and said, "No, it seems that they are deliberately trying to exhaust us until we don't even have the last bit of courage to fight, then they will attack." When Chu Xiu was in the Guangzhong torture room, Xiao Yi was the strongest of the 4 penal officers. At this time he had already stepped into the real pellet state. However, compared with the Imperial Guard outside, a real pellet state was nothing. Chu Yuanxing turned his head to another person and said, "Senior Chu, will there be reinforcements coming later?" It was Chu Wuji who was sitting next to Chu Yuanxing. Because Chu Wuji was also in the real fire spiritual refinement state, he had the strength to guard one side. When he heard that the Guangzhong torture room was surrounded, he also took the initiative to come. Wei Shuya went to Wei Jun to help. However, he was a martial artist who had just advanced to the real fire spiritual refinement state, but he had to face 3 existences who had already stepped into the real fire spiritual refinement state. Even if Chu Wuji never thought that he was weaker than anyone, he was not confident at this time. Chu Wuji shook his head and said, "I don't know. The news has already been sent out. Let's see who Yanjing City will send. Don't be afraid. Even if the Northern Yan Imperial Court doesn't send someone, Jinwu Hall will send someone." Although Chu Wuji said so, in fact he was not confident in his heart. The news had already been sent out, but there was no communication array between the Guangzhong torture room and the Northern Yan Imperial Court. They could only rely on manpower to send messages. So when the Northern Yan Imperial Court got the news and sent people over, he was not sure if they would make it in time. Chu Yuanxing nodded and said, "Well, even if we have to hold on, we have to hold on until the reinforcements come. The foundation of the Guangzhong torture room can't be destroyed like this." Everyone said that Chu Yuanxing was a tiger father and a dog son. Compared with Chu Kuanga, he really couldn't find anything special about him. Could even be said that he was extremely mediocre. But no matter how mediocre Chu Yuanxing was, he was not a good-for-nothing, nor was he a villain. This time, when Eastern Qi attacked the Guangzhong torture room, many people in the Guangzhong torture room were already complaining that it was because of Chu Xiu that the Guangzhong torture room was caught in the flames of war. In response to this kind of voice, Chu Yuanxing was the first to suppress it. Although Chu Xiu was the actual ruler of the Guangzhong torture room, he helped him to the position of hall master and did not take away any of the authority that he should have. The Guangzhong torture room was even stronger than before. Chu Xiu did not betray him, so naturally he would not betray Chu Xiu. Chu Yuanxing could not do something like surrender for survival. And most importantly, the Guangzhong torture room was left behind by his father, Chu Kuanga. This might be the only obsession that Chu Yuanxing had in this life. His strength was weak and his ability was limited. He could not protect and strengthen the Guangzhong torture room, but others could. Therefore, he did not object to the fact that Chu Xiu was actually in control of the Guangzhong torture room. As long as the Guangzhong torture room was still there, and as long as the Guangzhong torture room was getting better, that was enough. But now, someone wanted to destroy the Guangzhong torture room. No matter how weak Chu Yuanxing was, he was ready to fight to the death with his enemies. His father was a great hero and he died for the sake of justice. He, Chu Yuanxing, was not worth mentioning, but he was willing to fight to the death for the Guangzhong torture room. At this moment, there was a sudden battle cry from outside. Chu Wuji stood up and said in a low voice, "Eastern Qi, they're attacking the city. Hallmaster Chu, you stay here and leave the rest to me." Chu Yuanxing shook his head and said, "I want to go out with you." Chapter 1000. Guanzhong had been through the fires of war and was located on all sides. Even if it was a city, it could easily be flattened if a war broke out. Therefore, after the Guanzhong torture room was built, they even spent a lot of money to build such a majestic steel city. It was indeed not easy to break through. Seeing that his soldiers could only climb up using ladders, Nangong Weiyu took out a crimson halberd with a scorching aura. Holding the halberd, Nangong Weiyu headed straight for the city gates. He pointed the halberd at the sky. In an instant, the wind and clouds howled in the air, burning red like fire. With a loud bang, the halberd fell, and a powerful wave of heat rushed straight for the city gates. Even the steel city could not withstand the killing blow of a true fire cultivator in the spirit ascension realm. But at this moment, a strange weapon that looked like a saber but not a saber and shaped like a crescent moon slashed down with a dazzling blood-red moonlight. Its earth energy seemed to cut through the heavens and earth. With a loud bang, it blocked Nangong Weiyu's halberd. Chu Wuji stood on top of the city gates and sneered, "It's General Nangong's turn so soon. Don't you think it's too degrading?" Nangong Weiyu said lightly, "Chu Wuji, it's you. No matter what, you used to be part of the royal family of the Wei Kingdom. You should be on the side of Eastern Qi. Why are you on the side of the Northern Yan?" Chu Wuji said coldly, "Back then my Wei Kingdom was on the side of Eastern Qi. So what? A country that deserves to be destroyed will still be destroyed. Moreover, Xianglong is dead and so are those who participated in the war to destroy my Wei Kingdom. I'm not on the side of the Northern Yan now, I'm on the side of the diabolism." Although the Wei Kingdom was destroyed by the Northern Yan, in fact Chu Wuji did not have a good impression of Eastern Qi. The Wei Kingdom was a small country and could only survive in the cracks. However, back then Wei Kingdom chose to side with Eastern Qi, but what happened in the end? The Wei Kingdom was destroyed, but Eastern Qi did not send reinforcements. Instead they retreated. Later on, Lu Haochang became even more terrified. He didn't want to fight anymore, so he let this matter go. The only sacrifice was Wei Kingdom. Under such circumstances, it would be strange if Chu Wuji had a good impression of Eastern Qi. "General Nangong, why are you wasting your breath on this evil scoundrel? Just attack him." Mako Mori had already walked out of the formation and stood beside Nangong Weiyu, as did Helian Changfeng. The three of them stood together and formed a joint attack. At this moment, Chu Wuji's heart sank. Eastern Qi teamed up with the righteous martial arts world. This was indeed a force to be reckoned with. Even in a place like the Guanzhong torture room, they had already thrown 3 true fire spirit ascension realm cultivators. One could imagine how much pressure the other places were under. Facing this kind of attack, Chu Wuji snorted coldly, but he didn't retreat. The divine weapon in his hand danced in the air, and blood-colored moonlight sprinkled out. He actually fought 1 against 3 and directly slashed towards the 3 of them. Nangong Weiyu sneered. Miaoyue Dharma Supreme, Chu Wuji had quite a reputation in the diabolism. It should be said that before Chu Xiu appeared, Chu Wuji was the strongest among the new generation of the diabolism. However, who here was mediocre? The general of Eastern Qi, the chief hall leader of White Tiger Hall, and the perfected masters of the previous generation of Chunyang Dao sect, none of them were mediocre. Helian Changfeng slashed down with the saber in his hand. The White Tiger deity shield, which was filled with murderous intent, tore through the void. Mako Mori formed a Taoist seal with his hand. Pure Yang Qi destroyed all evil and demons, and its power was boundless. Finally, Nangong Weiyu's halberd swept down as if it was splitting a mountain. The 3 of them joined forces and Chu Wuji was sent flying. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. In less than 3 moves, Chu Wuji was already heavily injured. Even the divine weapon in his hand, the divine weapon, let out a mournful wail. Nangong Weiyu shook his head. "Fight till the end? Your courage is commendable, but it's still useless." As Nangong Weiyu's voice fell, the flames on the halberd in his hand floated, and the scorching stellar energy dyed half the sky red. The halberd smashed down and the fire dragon roared out. Just as Chu Wuji was about to burn his blood essence and fight again, and if he really could not do it, he would retreat with Chu Yuanxing and the others. A whistling sound suddenly rang out. Wherever the pitch-black arrow passed, even the spiritual qi of heaven and earth was extinguished. With a loud explosion, the arrow landed on the majestic fire dragon. In an instant, the scarlet flames on the fire dragon began to extinguish, and were replaced by the black flames of apocalyptic destruction. The flames of apocalyptic destruction even extended along the fire dragon to Nangong Weiyu's halberd. His expression suddenly changed, and the raging stellar energy around him suddenly erupted, completely expelling the power. Triple City Destroying Arrow. Chu Wuji immediately sighed in relief, but Nangong Weiyu and the others' expressions changed, and their hearts tightened. Chu Xiu, why was he here? He had come from Yanjing City and he was so fast? In the air, Chu Xiu's body flashed with monstrous demon energy. He descended step by step and looked at Nangong Weiyu. He said coldly, Are you worthy of using halberd? Everyone in Guangzhou City heaved a sigh of relief when they saw Chu Xiu. While there had been people silently criticizing Chu Xiu for bringing all of Guangzhou into the flames of war and so on. But now that Chu Xiu had appeared, they knew that the entire Guangzhou torture room only had one pillar, and that was Chu Xiu. Nangong Weiyu was about to say something with a dark face, when Chu Xiu pointed at him and said, Retreat. What a joke. Nangong Weiyu sneered and said, Chu Xiu, do you really think you're invincible? My Imperial Guard has tens of thousands of elites. Do you think you can handle them all by yourself? Chu Xiu turned to Chu Wuji and said, Lead all the members of Guangzhou torture room out of the city and fight to the death. I'll handle these three. Chu Wuji nodded and immediately ran back into the city. This time, Chu Xiu came to Guangzhou torture room alone, while Xiang Chong directly returned to Yanjing City. He alone was enough to save the Guangzhou torture room. Xiang Chong still had to manage the 9-dragon seal and could not leave Yanjing City for too long. On the other side, when Nangong Weiyu and the other two saw Chu Xiu's attitude of ignoring them, their faces darkened at the same time. Although the three of them admitted that Chu Xiu was indeed powerful, and even in the primitive Devil's Cave, he could even force Su Ci from the Great Light Temple to retreat with one all-out attack. However, the three of them weren't nobodies. Chu Xiu, did you really think that you could defeat them? But before the three of them could make a move, Chu Xiu had already made the first move. The evil moon saber was already in his hand, and the power of the heart demon began to suppress the weapon spirit of the evil moon saber. There was only 15 minutes, but to deal with the three of them, not to mention 15 minutes, half an hour was enough. The long saber slashed down and a blood-colored crescent moon appeared in midair. This blood-colored crescent moon was very similar to the scene when Chu Wuji used the divine weapon, Wonderful Moon. However, in Chu Xiu's saber, there was endless evil power. Even the space was distorted and the surrounding power was swallowed. The saber headed straight for Nangong Weiyu. Feeling the power in the saber, Nangong Weiyu's expression changed. The halberd in his hand danced wildly, and the roar of a flaming dragon surrounded him like a shield of fire. The corners of Chu Xiu's mouth curled up into a mocking smile. The ancient halberd is a ferocious weapon used in battle. What's more important is its aura. The halberd can only be used to attack, not to defend. Halberd is really a disgrace in your hands. As the general of Eastern Qi, Nangong Weiyu's Imperial Guard strength was enough to rank in the top 3 of the 9 border armies. But his use of halberd was really not as good as that of Lu Fengxian. Although Lu Fengxian had not yet reached the true fire spirit refining realm, when Lu Fengxian reached the true fire spirit refining realm, she would be able to beat her opponent. The evil moon saber slashed down, and the evil power continued to devour the power of the flaming dragon, strengthening itself. The saber and the halberd collided, and the dazzling blood-colored blade directly tore the flaming dragon apart. Nangong Weiyu suddenly felt an extremely strong force attack him, and his whole body was blasted away. As a martial artist with a military background, and using a fierce weapon like the halberd, Nangong Weiyu had naturally cultivated a body-tempering technique. However, no matter how strong Nangong Weiyu's body was, he was not as strong as Chu Xiu, who had already cultivated the true fire spirit refining realm. At this time, Mako Mori and Helian Changfeng's attacks had already reached Chu Xiu. The Dao sword in Mako Mori's hand blossomed with pure sunlight, and it was as dazzling as the sun. He had cultivated the pure yang astral qi for his entire life, and his power was already extremely pure. Under the pure yang astral qi, no other power could be tolerated. The saber in Helian Changfeng's hand was like it could split the mountains and split the seas. The extreme sharpness even tore apart the heaven and earth essence energy. The Western White Tiger's Eugene sharpness was unleashed to the extreme. As the saber shadow descended, there was even a white tiger's blood shadow lingering within the white tiger baleful god shield. In that instant, Chu Xiu's hands formed a seal. Majestic demonic chi and scorching Buddhist light were released simultaneously, and an evil Dharma idol appeared behind him. On one side was the Vairocana seal. The Dharma idol was solemn and dignified, and the Buddhist light was resplendent. On the other side was the demonic god Mahakala. He was ferocious and furious, and his demonic flames surged to the skies. This Dharma idol had 2 faces and 4 arms. The Vairocana seal formed by the colorless sealing palm was like a mustard seed, and the heavens and earth were all enveloped within it. In an instant, it had already shattered Helian Changfeng's white tiger baleful god shield, and shattered the white tiger Dharma idol with a single slap. The demonic god of the great Mahakala put his palms together, and from the 3 eyes on the top of his head, endless apocalyptic flames came roaring down. Its might was earth-shattering, and it directly enveloped Mako Mori in his apocalyptic flames, devouring the pure yang energy around him. He was forced to use all his strength to use the Tao sword in his hand to slash apart the apocalyptic flames, and only then was he able to escape. In just 2 moves all 3 of them were forced to retreat. In an instant Chu Xiu's might was immeasurable. And at this time the gates of Guangzhong City also opened. Under the lead of Chu Wuji, Xiao Yi, and the others, a group of Guangzhong torture room martial artists immediately rushed towards the Imperial Guard outside. In an instant the sounds of killing filled the heavens and earth, and killing intent surged to the heavens. Chapter 1001. The number of martial artists in the Guangzhong torture room wasn't considered small, but as compared to the Imperial Guard, they were lacking in coordination. In one-on-one battles or when a small number of people fought, the Guangzhong torture room's martial artists would definitely have the upper hand. Although the Guangzhong torture room's martial artists had the upper hand in terms of numbers and injuries, they were still at a disadvantage when it came to actual combat. However, in this battlefield, other than the Guangzhong torture room's martial artists being at a disadvantage at the beginning, the Guangzhong torture room was suppressing their opponents. The reason was simple. Nangong Weiyu was also being suppressed by Chu Xiu. As a general, Nangong Weiyu was almost equivalent to the soul of the Imperial Guard. In the end, Nangong Weiyu was defeated at the front line, and this was a huge blow to the morale of the entire Imperial Guard. Nangong Weiyu also saw the scene below. He turned to Helian Changfeng and Mako Mori and shouted, "Let's attack together. Don't let Chu Xiu get the chance." Based on Chu Xiu's current strength, they might not be a match for Chu Xiu one-on-one, but they didn't believe that they couldn't defeat Chu Xiu if the 3 of them attacked together. Fire patterns appeared around Nangong Weiyu's body, and a majestic aura poured into the halberd in his hand. The long halberd slashed down, and the roar of the fire dragon resounded throughout the sky. Mako Mori bit his thumb and drew a pure Yang Dao pattern in the void with his burning blood. When his sword slashed on the pure Yang Dao pattern, countless pure Yang runes flourished and shrouded towards Chu Xiu. Helian Changfeng didn't make a move, but the surging killing intent around him had already evolved into a materialized white tiger fiend divine constellation, which condensed on the battle saber in his hand. A piercingly cold and sharp intent surged up, but it was not released. He was waiting for the most suitable moment for him to strike. In the face of the 3's all-out attacks, Chu Xiu formed a seal with his hands. In an instant, a turbulent demonic aura rose from his feet, and even his eyes were completely dyed black. Murmurs that seemed to come from the sticks of hell resounded throughout the world. As Chu Xiu displayed his hand seals, the sky wept and blood rained down. The pure Yang runes that wrapped around Chu Xiu burst and melted under the dense rain of blood, and couldn't even last for a breath of time. Moreover, within the blood rain, the boundless blood color actually condensed into a huge fiend celestial phantom that was 10,000 feet tall. With a grab, it directly crushed the fire dragon that Nangong Weiyu had conjured with his power as if it were an earthworm. In that instant, the sky wept and blood rain stopped. Mako Mori and Nangong Weiyu both spat out a mouthful of blood. After Chu Xiu's heaven and earth demon weeping mantra gained new insights in primitive demon cave, its power could be said to have risen to a whole new level. Although it couldn't replicate the power of primitive demon cave, it wasn't much weaker. But at this moment, the moment that the sky wept and blood rain disappeared, a cool breeze suddenly blew past. In the next moment, Helian Changfeng's saber-wielding figure had already appeared in front of Chu Xiu. No one saw how he had attacked, not even Chu Xiu. Clouds follow dragons, wind follows tigers. Helian Changfeng's saber was filled with killing intent, but it borrowed the power of the wind to pass through layers of space. By the time the saber fell, it had already touched Chu Xiu's protective astral energy. The killing intent frantically tore through the astral energy, and the saber intent was even about to corrode Chu Xiu's body. This was Helian Changfeng's essence, qi and spirit had reached its peak. Taking advantage of the fact that Nangong Weiyu and Mako Mori had already offset Chu Xiu's killer move, he slashed out at the critical point where Chu Xiu's strength was connected. He was confident that no one in the same realm could dodge his saber. But at this moment, Chu Xiu's evil moon saber seemed to have a mind of its own. It suddenly appeared in front of the two, and the twisted blood-colored moonlight swallowed everything in an instant. The heart demon shouted in Chu Xiu's mind, "Only 3 breaths of time left. I've forcefully used the evil moon saber to protect its master, and I've used up too much energy. I can no longer suppress the weapon spirit. 3 breaths of time is enough." The moment Chu Xiu clenched the evil moon saber, the saber intent of the break formula slashed out. Although this slash was hurriedly executed and not Chu Xiu's full strength, the invincible saber intent of the break formula directly destroyed all of Helian Changfeng's attacks. The white tiger baleful god shield was torn apart. Helian Changfeng watched as the saber in his hand was shattered like tofu by the demonic long saber in Chu Xiu's hand. That was the white tiger hall's divine weapon that had been passed down for generations, the death god. Of course, at this moment Helian Changfeng couldn't care less about the saber in his hand. The moment the saber intent of the break formula appeared, the invincible energy charged straight at Helian Changfeng. Just shattering a saber wasn't the limit of the break formula's saber intent. This slash could cut the heavens, shatter the earth, and destroy all things in the world. There was nothing it couldn't break. Explosions of energy rang out. The seemingly solid white tiger baleful god shield was as fragile as tofu in front of this slash. Helian Changfeng's figure retreated quickly, but cracks had already appeared on his battle armor. The saber intent was about to enter his body. With a roar, the blood energy around Helian Changfeng ignited. A hazy bloody mist condensed into a white tiger dharma idol behind Helian Changfeng. As it roared angrily at the sky, it received the power of the white tiger star god. Even though the sky was clear and boundless, Helian Changfeng still forcibly guided a streak of starlight down and attached it to the white tiger behind him. As the white tiger roared, a force that contained the power of the stars and boundless blood qi gushed out from its mouth. However, it was still torn apart by the saber intent of the break formula. However, it finally offset the power of Chu Xiu's slash. Helian Changfeng's eyes flickered with fear. He no longer had any intention of fighting Chu Xiu. With a pale face he turned around and fled. At that moment he really felt that death was about to befall him. Perhaps if he had used just a little more strength, he would have been completely cut into pieces by Chu Xiu's slash. At this time Chu Xiu did not stop. He gathered devil qi in his hand and shot out 3 Annihilation City arrows. Moreover, it was not just 1 arrow but 3 consecutive arrows. The 3 arrows went straight for Mako Mori. When they arrived in front of him they exploded. The power of nirvana eroded Mako Mori's pure yang aura qi. The endless annihilation fire had completely enveloped the old Taoist. After the 3 arrows, Chu Xiu did not even look at them. He went straight for Nangong Weiyu. The power of the heart demon could no longer suppress the evil moon saber. Chu Xiu simply did not use the evil moon saber. Instead he punched at Nangong Weiyu. With Chu Xiu's current physical strength, it was enough to take on a divine weapon. Nangong Weiyu was forced to retreat step by Chu Xiu. He roared angrily, and a layer of purple flames ignited in his eyes. On the halberd, the purple flames erupted. A tiny spark contained a powerful explosive force. However, in the next moment, Chu Xiu's body was filled with Buddhist light. The Mahavairokkana Dharma idol appeared behind him. The colorless ceiling palm imprint fell again, distorting the space between heaven and earth. In an instant, the power of Chu Xiu's attack was completely dissipated. Nangong Weiyu was about to go crazy. It was this move again. Only God knew that he, Chu Xiu, was a ferocious and powerful devil. Why would he know such a fierce and imposing Buddhist martial art? However, what Nangong Weiyu did not expect was that Chu Xiu's colorless ceiling palm imprint was even stronger than the one he had used against Helian Changfeng. At that time, Chu Xiu had attacked both Helian Changfeng and Mako Mori at the same time. But now he was only attacking Nangong Weiyu. Under the twisting strangulation of the endless Buddhist light, the divine weapon halberd in Nangong Weiyu's hand actually shattered. Before Nangong Weiyu had time to feel distressed, Chu Xiu took a step forward and was already in front of him. His fist, which was shining with the flames of destruction, blasted down. It was mixed with the fist intent of the mountain and sea fist scripture. It could shatter mountains and split seas. On Nangong Weiyu's arm, the Crimson Gang Chi turned into a roaring fire dragon and met Chu Xiu's fist. But in the next moment, the fire dragon had already been swallowed by the flames of destruction. The armor on his body could not even withstand the power of Chu Xiu's fist and was shattered. His whole body was also blasted away, vomiting blood. At this moment, the soldiers of the Imperial Guard below saw that their general was actually vomiting blood by Chu Xiu. This was definitely a huge blow to their morale, and there were even deserters. If it were not for the strict military discipline of the Imperial Guard, they would have already begun to collapse. Cover the middle army, retreat. Nangong Weiyu covered his chest and shouted angrily. Helian Changfeng had already escaped, and Mako Mori's fate was unknown. He no longer had the intention to continue fighting. Chu Xiu did not chase after Nangong Weiyu, but turned to look at Mako Mori, who was surrounded by the flames of destruction. In the next moment, a scorching pure yang light rushed out from the flames of destruction, turned into a sword light and fled. It was Mako Mori's figure, but no one knew how much he had paid for it. The three of them fled in three different directions. Chu Xiu did not chase after them, and he also breathed a sigh of relief. Using the Devil's Whale Great Compassion mantra and the sword intent of the breaking word formula consecutively, and fighting 1 against 3 in a short period of time, took a lot out of Chu Xiu. It was meaningless to forcibly chase after them. At most, he could only leave one of them alive, and there was still a mess at the Guanzhong torture room to deal with. At this time, the Guanzhong torture room had won completely. With Chu Xiu fighting the 3 true fire spirit refinement realm existences, although Chu Wuji was injured, he still had combat strength. In addition, the Guanzhong torture room had a large number of people. Even if it was a chaotic battle without any formation, the effect was not bad. Chu Wuji walked over with a slightly pale face. He looked at Chu Xiu with a look of surprise. Previously in the primitive devil cave, Chu Xiu had forced Su Ci to retreat with his saber. But at that time there was too little time, and he could not observe Chu Xiu's true strength. Now, Chu Xiu was fighting 1 against 3 and all 3 of them were seriously injured. This was a little terrifying. If these 3 people were at the level of the Sun family ancestor or the Lu family ancestor, it would not be a big deal. But these 3 people were not easy to deal with. Their combat strength stood at the peak of the same realm, but they were still crushed by Chu Xiu. This was a little terrifying. Chapter 1002. The battle between the Guanzhong torture room and the Imperial Guard was also a great loss. Looking at Chu Wuji's complexion, he had also suffered some injuries. Chu Xiu handed over a bottle of elixir and asked, "How serious is the injury? Where is Elder Wei?" Chu Wuji took the elixir and shook his head. "It's not too serious. Elder Wei should have gone to Wei County, which is also the main point of Eastern Qi's attack. But 3 of the 5 armies of Eastern Qi and the Masters of the Imperial Worship Hall are already there, so it should be much easier." After saying that, Chu Wuji sighed and said, "Your current strength is probably infinitely close to the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, isn't it? The combination of true fire-tempering spirit and true fire-tempering body is really terrifying. I even want to give it a try." Of course, Chu Wuji was just saying it. He would be crazy to try such a thing. The true fire-tempering body could not be practiced without great perseverance. The success of Chu Xiu's cultivation was largely due to luck. If others were like him, being blasted into pieces and still not dying, it was possible for them to cultivate the true fire-tempering body after their body was reconstructed. The mysterious realm of heaven and earth is not so easy to deal with. At our level, each step is a different heaven. The difference between clouds and mud is not so easy to surpass. Chu Wuji said, "But in my opinion, you have at least crossed the half-heaven." After a few words of greeting, Chu Wuji directly followed Chu Xiu into Guanzhong City. Xiao Yi and the others were counting the losses of the Guanzhong torture room. When they saw Chu Xiu, they all bowed respectfully. Chu Yuanxing also saw Chu Xiu. He looked a little embarrassed because he did not know how to address Chu Xiu. Although he already knew that Chu Xiu was using him, Chu Yuanxing did not really hate Chu Xiu. After all, his interests had not been harmed, and even his father's position had returned to him. The power of the Guanzhong torture room was also greater than before. Back then he was Chu Xiu's big brother. But now, Chu Xiu was no longer the Jianghu arrester of the Guanzhong torture room. He was a giant of the diabolism, an ambitious and ruthless figure who controlled the entire northern Yan martial world. It could even be said that his father was not as strong as Chu Xiu at his peak. Back when Chu Kuanga had fought against Divine Lord Luo of Tianmen, He had only managed to seriously injure Divine Lord Luo by sacrificing his own life. But now Chu Xiu could already kill an Elysium Divine General. This was the difference between them. Before Chu Yuanxing could say anything, Chu Xiu walked over first, cupped his hands and said, "Big brother, how have you been? This time I came late. If I had come earlier, maybe the cities of the Guanzhong torture room would not have been lost." Seeing that Chu Xiu's attitude towards him was almost the same as before, Chu Yuanxing also breathed a sigh of relief, and even looked a little touched. "Brother Chu, you don't have to blame yourself. You came at the right time. In fact, the Guanzhong torture room did not lose anything. Previously, we knew that with the strength of the Guanzhong torture room, it was basically a mantis trying to stop a chariot when faced with the army of Eastern Qi. So when the army of Eastern Qi first arrived, we had already withdrawn our men. The cities that Eastern Qi occupied were just empty cities. Moreover, the Eastern Qi also wanted to completely occupy Guanzhong, so they did not make things difficult for some of the martial arts forces or other people in the cities." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "That's good. After we finish counting the casualties, let's go to the meeting. The retreat of the Imperial Guards does not mean that we are safe. Eastern Qi does not only have one Imperial Guard." An hour later, all the higher-ups of the Guanzhong torture room and Chu Wuji came to the meeting hall. Chu Yuanxing wanted Chu Xiu to sit in the main seat, but Chu Xiu refused. With his current status, he no longer needed to sit in the main seat to win status and respect. In fact, with Chu Xiu's current strength, the Guanzhong torture room was dispensable to him. Chu Yuanxing did not betray him in the past, so naturally he would not betray Chu Yuanxing. So as long as he was alive, the Guanzhong torture room would always have the surname Chu. Secretly, the surname was Chu Xiu, and publicly the surname was Chu Yuanxing. Moreover, Chu Xiu also admired Chu Kuanga, Chu Juxia. But admiration was just admiration. Chu Xiu would be Chu Kuanga for the rest of his life. "How are the casualties in the Guanzhong torture room?" Chu Xiu asked. Xiao Yi said in a deep voice, "More than 3,000 people died and 10,000 were injured. In such a battle, the Guanzhong torture room does not have the upper hand." After that, Xiao Yi looked up at Chu Xiu carefully and said, "My lord, can the Northern Yin send reinforcements over?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "It's very difficult. The Northern Yan's strength is obvious, and the 5 armies of the state have already been sent out. If we were to transfer more troops, we would have to transfer the royal guard stationed around the Yanjing city to protect the palace." The expressions of the martial artists in the Guanzhong torture room changed. Without reinforcements, how could they defend the Guanzhong torture room? Don't think that the Guanzhong torture room was strong before, but this was a war between nations. A powerful army built with the strength of a nation was not something that the Guanzhong torture room could withstand. However, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "We can't get reinforcements from the Northern Yin, but we can think of a way to change the target for the Eastern Qi in Northern Yin. The Guanzhong torture room is not the main place. Wei County has Jiangshan Pavilion as the front line, and the border between the Northern Yin and Eastern Qi is also a place that both sides will fight for. The Guanzhong torture room is actually dispensable to the Eastern Qi." Xiao Yi smiled bitterly and said, "But the problem now is, how can we make the Eastern Qi change their mind?" Chu Xiu thought about it and knocked on the table, saying, "The Guanzhong torture room has been the center of trade between the 3 nations for so many years. You torture officers must have been involved in smuggling, right?" The expressions of Xiao Yi and the others changed slightly. Chu Xiu waved his hand casually and said, "Don't be nervous. Back when I was a torture officer in the Guanzhong torture room, I also did this kind of thing. Every man for himself will be destroyed by heaven and earth. Who can avoid such a lucrative business? All of you have been in the Guanzhong torture room longer than me. For so many years, have there been any Eastern Qi bigwigs, royalty, and the like who interfered in the smuggling business? Can you contact them?" Xiao Yi nodded and said, "Yes, we can contact them. But Lord, this is the time of war between the Eastern Qi and the Northern Yin. Even if we can contact them, they won't dare to interfere." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Don't worry, you just need to contact them. As long as the benefits are enough, it's not like they won't betray their country. You just need to contact them according to what I said. I won't show myself since my identity is sensitive. But I will tell you what to say in secret." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, although Xiao Yi was still puzzled, he could only nod and agree. After so many years in the Guanzhong torture room, Xiao Yi and the others had accumulated a lot of connections. If the people in the Eastern Qi wanted to smuggle things to the Northern Yin and West Chu, they would have to sneak in with small caravans. Big caravans would have to get through to the inspectors. And for some extremely sensitive things, they had to get through to the torture officers. So Xiao Yi and the others knew quite a few of the powerful people in the Eastern Qi imperial court. But at this critical moment, these people didn't want to see Xiao Yi. But Chu Xiu's method was very rough. He directly threatened them that if they didn't come, he would hand over the evidence of their smuggling to the Eastern Qi imperial court, especially the contraband they had smuggled to the northern Yan. So although this group of people was angry, they still came obediently. Of course, they weren't stupid enough to enter the territory of the Guanzhong torture room. Instead, they found a place where the Eastern Qi and the Guanzhong torture room intersected to meet with Xiao Yi. In an inn in a small town, Xiao Yi had booked the entire inn. Sitting across from him were several people dressed in luxurious clothes. There were old and young people, but all of them had angry expressions on their faces. One of them said coldly, "Lord Xiao, this is not what you did. We have worked together so many times before. Even if we can't do business, we can still be friends. You followed Chu Xiu and the northern Yan, but now that you are being pressured by the army, you implicated us. What is the meaning of this?" Xiao Yi knew the identity of the people in front of him. They were all nobles in the Eastern Qi and some were even royalty. For example, the person in front of him was Lu Changlong, Duke Huai of the Eastern Qi. He belonged to the collateral royal family. Although he was conferred the title of duke, he didn't have any real power. So he spent most of his time making money and enjoying himself. Xiao Yi waved his hand and said, "Everyone please calm down. None of you want to see me. I have no other choice. That's why I came up with this trick. Now, everyone should know the predicament of the Guanzhong torture room. This time I am here to ask for your help." Lu Changlong and the others shook their heads quickly and said, "Don't, Lord Xiao. You know our background. How can we have a say in such a big matter?" Xiao Yi laughed and said, "Everyone here is a famous person in the Eastern Qi imperial court. Why can't you have a say in this? Don't worry. Since we are asking for help, the Guanzhong torture room will naturally show our sincerity. When the Guanzhong torture room calms down, I won't take a single cent from the things you want to smuggle in the future. And as long as you agree to help the Guanzhong torture room once, everything here will belong to you." As he spoke, Xiao Yi opened a secret space box. Inside was a mountain of gold, silver, and jewelry. Although these things weren't very useful to martial artists, they were still real money. Chu Xiu wanted to bribe them with these things, which made Xiao Yi's heart ache. Seeing these things, Lu Changlong and the others were tempted. But they still shook their heads and said, "Although money is good, the Guanzhong torture room is on the side of the northern Yan. Helping you is equivalent to selling out the country. The money from selling out the country isn't easy to earn." At this moment, Xiao Yi heard Chu Xiu's voice. He was stunned for a moment, then he asked with a smile, "Let me ask you a question. Do you think that the northern Yan can swallow up the Eastern Qi?" Everyone at the scene immediately burst into laughter. LV Changlong disdainfully said, "Our great Qi sits on the rich and populous land of the Central Plains. There are many heroes and heroes. Even if His Majesty makes a few consecutive mistakes, those barbarians of northern Yan will not be able to swallow up great Qi." Xiao Yi smiled and said, "If that's the case, then why are you worried about selling out the country? Not to mention that the Guanzhong torture room is only doing this for self-preservation. Even if we really want you to sell out the country, Eastern Qi won't have any problems, right? If that's the case, what's the big deal about selling out once in a while?" Chapter 1003. Chu Xiu had always believed that there were people in this world who could stick to their principles, but more of them were those who were willing to betray their own lives for the sake of profit. These people even cared about their own lives, not to mention betraying their country. If there was enough profit, what was the big deal about betraying their country once in a while? The words that Chu Xiu had asked Xiao Yi to say could be said to be aimed at the hearts of everyone present. After all, it was just a small favor. Moreover, with their influence they could not affect the real strategy of Eastern Qi. Even if the Northern Yan really won this time with the strength of Northern Yan, they would not be able to annex Eastern Qi. In that case, what were they afraid of? Lu Changlong was the first to laugh. "We are old friends with Lord Xiao. If the Guanzhong torture room falls, it will affect our business in the future, won't it? I will do my part in this matter." With Lu Changlong taking the lead, the others also spoke up and accepted the gifts from the Guanzhong torture room with peace of mind. The nobles of Eastern Qi, such as Lu Changlong, were either useless royals with no real power or talent in martial arts, or some useless nobles who had made great contributions during the founding of the country but could only sit around and wait for death. They might not be of much use when dealing with official business, but they were very good at this kind of betrayal. Therefore, after returning to Eastern Qi, they discussed among themselves and took turns to offer Lu Haochang many good things. What did Lu Haochang like? It was nothing more than women and some rare playthings. Some offered stunning beauties that they had carefully cultivated, and some offered divine birds that they had caught from the 100,000 mountains. They looked like owls with green feathers and red beaks. They were docile and eloquent. Lu Haochang did not refuse any of these gifts. He accepted them and comforted Nangong Weiyu, who had lost the battle, and asked him to rest. He simply forgot about the Guanzhong torture room. In fact, Lu Haochang was not an idiot. He had been an emperor for so many years. Although he was mediocre, he was not muddle-headed. These guys suddenly offered him so many beauties and treasures. If they did not have any ulterior motives, Lu Haochang would never believe it. Therefore, he had secretly investigated and found out that these guys had a smuggling business in the Guanzhong torture room. That was why they were worried that the Guanzhong torture room would be destroyed. But after knowing this, Lu Haochang did not expose them, nor did he punish them. Instead, he pretended not to know and happily accepted their gifts, satisfying their requests. If the water was too clear, there would be no fish. As long as the Eastern Qi was safe, why should he care so much? Moreover, if he really cut off their business, they would all be so poor. How could they offer him so many beauties and treasures the next time there was a problem? Lu Haochang's seemingly stupid approach saved the Guanzhong torture room. The troops that the Eastern Qi had stationed around the Guanzhong torture room were all withdrawn. This allowed the Guanzhong torture room to finally heave a sigh of relief. Although the Guanzhong torture room was fine, Chu Xiu was not in a hurry to return to the northern Yan country. The victory or defeat of one place could not determine the direction of the whole war. In fact, Chu Xiu was also having a headache now. Things had developed to the stage of the national war. It was no longer something that could be solved by killing one or two people. Even if Chu Xiu was given a chance to kill Ling Yunzi, the supreme expert of the metaphysic realm of heaven and earth, it would be useless. Most of the orthodox sects in the Eastern Qi country had taken action. Some of them really wanted to eliminate the evil and defend the Tao, while some were doing it for the interests of all parties. And there was also the Eastern Qi imperial court. Once they started, not to mention the death of Ling Yunzi, even if the whole Chunyang Dao sect was destroyed, the Eastern Qi imperial court would not stop. The national war was not a child's play. Chu Xiu could not sit back and watch the northern Yan country perish, nor could he watch his own interests suffer. So now, he really had to think of a way to break out of this situation. After staying in the Guanzhong torture room for 2 days, Chu Xiu pondered a lot. He looked around, but there was really no power that he could borrow. In fact, Chu Xiu still had some connections in the Jianghu. For example, he was on good terms with Xie Xiaolu. He could totally pay some price to ask for help from Qin Qingdi's Heaven Alliance. But unfortunately, the Heaven Alliance could not affect the situation of the war. If Qin Qingdi was a metaphysic realm expert, it would be better. As for the Eastern Qi country, he could also ask the Mo family to help, but the strength of the Mo family of Shangyang was basically dispensable. So after thinking for a long time, since he could not find help from the Central Plains warriors, why not look a little further, such as overseas? He thought of overseas because of the Jiangshan Pavilion. Since ancient times, although the overseas martial arts world and the Central Plains warriors were connected, there was little communication between the two sides. The strength of the overseas martial arts world might not be as strong as the Central Plains warriors, but it was definitely not weak. The overseas martial arts world was able to cultivate people like Kang Dongming. There was also the Jiangshan Pavilion, which had been hunted down like a stray dog. It was also because of the resources of the overseas martial arts world that they could rise again. There was also Zhong Xinxiu. Strictly speaking, he was also an overseas martial artist. Everyone knew the name of the East Sea Unrestrained Sky. Although they did not know whether the so-called East Sea Unrestrained Sky was an island or something else, since the word East Sea was added, it was definitely overseas. With such a strong force by his side, why not borrow it? Although Chu Xiu did not know the situation of the overseas martial arts world, there were people who did, such as the Sixth Demon Sect. Although the Sixth Demon Sect was far away in the South Sea and the East Sea were both seas. Chu Xiu believed that there must be some understanding between them. Moreover, the reason why Chu Xiu went to the Sixth Demon Sect was to test whether or not the Sixth Demon Sect would intervene in this matter. This matter had already evolved into a war between the righteous and demonic sects. It had even reached the point where the three countries were fighting each other. The disturbance was already quite big. The bright demons and the hidden demons had already made their move, but the Sixth Demon Sect, a neutral existence, was still missing. After instructing Chu Yuanxing and the others to act as usual, but to be careful, Chu Xiu went all the way to the 6th demon sect in the South Sea. The 6th demon sect was only close to the South Sea, but it was actually on a strange island next to the South Sea coast. It was strange because the island was surrounded by a formation. Even if an ordinary person wanted to find it, they would not be able to. Of course, Chu Xiu was not an ordinary person. He wanted to meet the people of the 6th demon sect, so he directly released his aura in the sea. An hour later, Yi Buxuan immediately came out with some people to personally welcome him. Your esteemed sect is truly fortunate to have Master Chu here. Come. Let's enter the sect and welcome Master Chu before we talk about anything else. Yi Buxuan's attitude was very courteous, but there was a trace of falsehood in that courteousness. Chu Xiu said with a smile that was not a smile, Master Yi, you and I can be considered old acquaintances. There's no need to play such tricks, right? You should know why I'm here. You also know that I don't have the energy to attend a banquet. The northern Yin side is on fire. Yi Buxuan smiled bitterly. Official Chu, it's not that the 6th demon sect does not want to help, but we are in the South Sea. The South Sea is close to the southern barbarians. When the news came, do you know who came? Chu Xiu's heart stirred. Rama? Yi Buxuan smiled bitterly. It's Rama. Damn, the other party couldn't find the location of the 6th demon sect, so he directly branded a Buddhist seal on the sea. That power was like burning the sky and boiling the sea. One Buddhist seal evaporated who knows how much seawater. For a whole 3 days, the 6th demon sect was shrouded in mist. My 6th heavenly demon sect hasn't even made a move yet, but Rama has already come to warn us. If my 6th heavenly demon sect really makes a move, I reckon that before we can even reach northern Yin, we will be dealt with by the people from Sabodhi Monastery. Chu Xiu frowned slightly. This was the current situation in the pugilistic world. The righteous and the demonic were entangled. The righteous martial artists in West Chu wanted to make a move, but he found the moon-worshipping sect to stop them. In the south, the 6th demon sect also wanted to help, but they were threatened by the Sabodhi Monastery. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, I know Master Yi's difficulties, so this time I don't expect the 6th demon sect to make a move. I came to find you, Master Yi, to ask for a small favor. Hearing that Chu Xiu didn't force the 6th demon sect to make a move, Yi Buxuan let out a sigh of relief. He asked, What does official Chu want from me? It's very simple. I want you to accompany me to the East Sea, Master Yi. There's no hope for the Central Plains warriors for the time being, so I want to borrow the power of the overseas martial artists to deal a fatal blow to the Eastern Qi. As long as the Eastern Qi retreats, everything will be easy to solve. However, I don't know much about the overseas forces, so I can only ask for your help, Master Yi. The South Sea and the East Sea are both seas. As for the overseas forces, it's more reliable to find someone like Master Yi who is familiar with them. Yi Buxuan smiled bitterly. The South Sea and the East Sea are very different. However, I have been to the East Sea several times. Although I don't know much about it, I have a general understanding. It's possible to go with official Chu this time. However, official Chu, I still advise you to be more cautious. Even if you go to the East Sea, it's very likely that you'll return empty-handed. The overseas martial artists rarely get involved in the affairs of the Central Plains. If you want them to rashly come to the Central Plains and make an enemy of a big country like the Eastern Qi, it'll be very difficult. Chu Xiu squinted and said, They didn't come before because they didn't have enough benefits. Jiangshan Pavilion is doing well in the overseas forces. Why do they want to return to the Central Plains now? Isn't it because they have enough benefits? Master Yi, just lead the way. I'll take care of everything else. Even if it's difficult, we still have to try. If we don't try, how will we know it's not possible? Since Chu Xiu didn't want to listen to his advice, he didn't say much. He just took it as a wasted trip. The overseas martial arts world and the Central Plains warriors were basically two different regions. Although Chu Xiu had a great reputation among the Central Plains warriors, it might not be effective in the overseas forces. Chapter 1004. The East Sea was very different from the South Sea. The biggest difference was the number of people. There were many storms in the South Sea, the climate was hot, and the environment was harsh. Therefore, the powers that could take root in the South Sea were all relatively strong like the 6th demon sect, so their numbers were naturally much lower. The East Sea, on the other hand, had a pleasant climate and abundant heaven-earth yuan qi. There were countless islands of various sizes, including commoners and martial artists. A long time ago, someone had even established a country in the East Sea. Unfortunately, there were too many variables in the East Sea, and they didn't last long before being destroyed. At present, a portion of the East Sea's powers were in the hands of sects and aristocratic families, while the other portion was in the hands of individual powerhouses. They controlled an island and became lords, but they usually didn't last long. There were very few that could last for 3 generations, and those that could last for more than 3 generations would naturally become sects or aristocratic families. For the sake of speed, Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan directly took a boat to the East Sea. The 6th Heavenly Demon Sect's ship was reinforced by a formation, so its speed in the sea was faster than that of a martial artist at the true fire spirit refinement realm. Most importantly, it saved energy and didn't need to stop. Otherwise, even if a true fire spirit refinement realm martial artist could draw in the power of heaven and earth for their own use, they still wouldn't be able to walk on the water for a long time. As they neared the East Sea, Chu Xiu asked, "Master Yi, in the East Sea, who is the most powerful and influential person?" Yi Buoxuan said, "Official Chu wants to make a move on the most influential person? That's not a bad idea. The East Sea has as many islands as there are hairs on an ox, and the various powers are also as numerous as hairs on an ox. However, the strongest person in the East Sea isn't actually the most influential. This is different from the Central Plains." Chu Xiu was surprised. "Oh, what?" Yi Buoxuan shook his head. "I'm not too sure, but it's been like this for tens of thousands of years. Perhaps it's because the martial artists born in the East Sea saw the boundless ocean when they were born. Their hearts yearned for the heavens and earth, but they yearned for power. Therefore, over the years, the most powerful people in the East Sea were all martial arts fanatics, and it was rare to see them. For example, the current #1 unrestrained Sky Lord Zhong Xinxiu was such a person. Everyone only knew that he lived in the deepest part of the East Sea, but no one had ever seen him before. And that Sword Saint of the East Sea, Kong Dongming. Official Chu, you should have dealt with him before and know his strength. This guy is the same." Chu Xiu muttered, "In that case, none of the most powerful people in the East Sea are in the heaven and earth elemental enlightenment realm." Yi Buoxuan nodded and said, "That's right. Moreover, the land of the Eastern Sea was roughly divided into 2 regions. One was the sea near the Eastern Qi land, called the Breezy Sea. There were many islands there, and the wind and waves were relatively mild. It was more suitable for the common people and martial artists to live in. The deeper part of the sea was called the Breezy Sea. There were often howling winds and waves, and the smaller islands would be submerged. Only the truly large islands and powerful martial artists could survive there. The environment there was even worse than in the South Sea. Therefore, Official Chu basically didn't have to consider the forces in the Breezy Sea. The forces on the large islands there were self-sufficient, and they were too far away from Eastern Qi. They wouldn't be easily moved. There were many forces in the Breezy Sea, and most of them had trade with Eastern Qi. Some even traveled between the Central Plains and overseas. These people are worth considering." "Then who is the strongest person in the Breezy Sea?" "Supreme Island Lord, God I Hua Xingzuan, the 5th Lord Hua." Yi Buoxuan didn't even hesitate and spat out the name. "He's very strong and his force is also very strong?" Since he dared to name his island Supreme Island, was he really going to be the master of the overseas region? At this moment, a strange expression appeared on Yi Buoxuan's face as he said, "Although he is also at the true fire spirit refinement realm, his strength isn't too great. Not to mention the fact that he's already old. Even when he was young he was still a mediocre person in the same realm. At the very least, I don't fear him at all. Strictly speaking, his force isn't very strong. There aren't many forces that belong to him, but the forces that are indirectly related to him can dominate the Breezy Sea." Chu Xiu suddenly became interested in this 5th Lord Hua. The composition of the overseas region is quite interesting. Someone like this can dominate a sea region as large as the Breezy Sea? Yi Buoxuan said, "The main reason why Hua Xingzuan has the power he has today is because of his foresight. Hua Xingzuan's nickname is God's Eye. This God's Eye doesn't refer to the fact that he cultivates some kind of eye technique that can shock the world and make the gods weep. Instead, it refers to the way he looks at people. Moreover, people call him 5th Master Hua not because he ranks 5th, but because he has 5 godson." At this point Yi Buoxuan clicked his tongue and sighed. "When I first heard about this, even I sighed. This 5th Master Hua was either a grandmaster proficient in the Tao of divination, or he really had some kind of treasure on him. His eyes were simply too divine." None of Hua Xingzuan's descendants are successful, but he has adopted 5 godson, and all of them are dragons and phoenixes among men. His eldest godson, sword maniac Qiu Tianya, is a master in the way of the sword. 50 years ago, he had already stepped into the true fire spirit refinement realm and was invincible in the breezy sea. If Kang Dongming had been born 50 years earlier, the title of Sword Saint of the Eastern Sea would not have fallen on his head. However, Qiu Qinya was a sword maniac and liked to test his swordsmanship. There was no one in the breezy sea who could match him, so he went to the Windbreaker Sea. It was said that he defeated several island lords of the large islands. In the end, he even went to challenge Zhong Xinxiu. However, there was no trace of him since then. Many people said that even if he did not die at the hands of Zhong Xinxiu, he was buried in the Boundless Sea region. Hua Xingzuan's second godson is the island lord of Divine Weapon Island. He is at the peak of the true fire spirit refinement realm and is known as the #1 general of the Eastern Sea, Bailey Pobbing. He uses his body to fight against divine weapons. Divine Weapon Island is not a place for forging divine weapons, but for burying divine weapons. His third godson is the largest fleet in the Eastern Sea, the master of the Blue Dragon Fleet, Fu Longxiao. He is at the peak of the true fire spirit refinement realm. In the entire breezy sea, only his Blue Dragon Fleet can safely travel between the breezy sea and the Windbreaker Sea without a single accident. His fourth godson is Nalen Hai. He is also at the true fire spirit refinement realm. However, he is a bit unlucky. In his early years he had a conflict with Kang Dongming. As a result, his legs were cut off by Kang Dongming. Now he is living in seclusion on a small island. A true fire spirit refinement realm martial artist without legs. Although his cultivation is still there, his combat power will be greatly reduced. As for his fifth godson, you should know about Official Chu. He is the current pavilion master of Jiangshan Pavilion, Zhao Yuanfeng. I heard that he has become the regent of Wei country. When Jiangshan Pavilion first came to the overseas region, it was basically a stray dog. It even had a conflict with some overseas forces, including the forces under the fifth Lord Hua. Zhao Yuanfeng was still very young at that time. He was not the person in charge of Jiangshan Pavilion yet. However, he dared to go to the Supreme Island alone to negotiate with the fifth Lord Hua. He was valued by the fifth Lord Hua. Not only did he end the conflict between them, but he also recognized Zhao Yuanfeng as his godson. The reason why Jiangshan Pavilion is able to establish itself in the overseas region is not only because of Zhao Yuanfeng's efforts, but also because of the fifth Lord Hua's reputation. Chu Xiu was shocked when he heard Yi Buoxuan telling him about the fifth Lord Hua. He had never heard of such a person before. He was lucky to have a big shot as his godson. However, if he was lucky to have 5 godson, then the fifth Lord Hua's luck must be off the charts. It was no wonder people called him the God's Eye. His ability to judge people was almost godly. However, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something. He said in surprise, I remember that Kang Dongming used to be a guest of Jiangshan Pavilion. He even crippled the leg of Hua Xingzuan's third godson. They must have a deep grudge against each other. Why would Jiangshan Pavilion still dare to use him? Yi Buoxuan chuckled and said, Official Chu, you fought with Kang Dongming before. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he's the strongest person in the Jianghu below the metaphysic realm of heaven and earth, right? Chu Xiu nodded. That kind of monster was certainly not an exaggeration. He was the only freak he had ever seen who could step into the metaphysic realm of heaven and earth but did not take the initiative to do so. Yi Buoxuan spread his hands and said, In the entire breezy sea, Kang Dongming is almost invincible. The 5 godson of Hua Xingzuan are indeed strong, but they can't do anything to the powerful Kang Dongming who has no desires. Fighting him to the death would be the worst deal. Moreover, Zhao Yuanfeng was only Hua Xingzuan's godson, not his biological son. Therefore they didn't have much of a relationship with Nalen Hai. For a godson they had no relationship with, exchanging an almost invincible guest of the breezy sea, which was a good deal. Of course, in the entire breezy sea at that time, only Zhao Yuanfeng dared to use Kang Dongming as a guest. Zhao Yuanfeng was Hua Xingzuan's 5th godson, so he didn't have to worry too much. However, the other forces were afraid of offending Nalen Hai and the 5th Lord Hua. Therefore, even if Kang Dongming took the initiative to come to them, they wouldn't dare to use him. Chu Xiu nodded in understanding. While they were talking, the giant ship had already arrived in the East Sea, heading straight for the largest island in the East Sea, Haotian Island. Haotian Island was the largest island in the entire East Sea, including the Breezy Sea and the Foam-splitting Sea. It was like a small piece of land. Haotian Island didn't belong to any force. Everyone could come to the island to trade, live and so on. More than 10 famous Jianghu masters of the Breezy Sea and the major forces sent some elites to form an alliance to maintain the basic order of Haotian Island. Yi Buoxuan brought Chu Xiu to Haotian Island first to inquire about the news. After all, he was from the South Sea. It had been several years since he last came to the East Sea. He didn't know if the situation in the East Sea had changed. Chapter 1005. As soon as Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan arrived on Haotian Island, they could feel the difference between this place and the Central Plains warriors. The biggest difference was not the attire, language, etc., but the atmosphere. Most of the Central Plains warriors were from sects and aristocratic families. Most of the people who came and went were also in cliques. Moreover, in the East Sea, sects and aristocratic families were a part of it. There were also some islands that were loosely allied. There were also many independent martial artists who came and went between the islands. Therefore it became a spectacle. Almost everywhere you could see martial artists trading all kinds of natural treasures and even secret manuals of martial arts. Some of the things that the Central Plains warriors thought couldn't be taught casually could be bought here as long as you could pay the right price. Naturally, information was also available. Moreover, the overseas anemophilia didn't have any integrity. At least the wind-sweeping tower would be a little particular. Some secret items would only be sold to one person. Moreover, in the overseas region, as long as you could afford it, they wouldn't dare to say anything. Chu Xiu followed Yi Buoxuan to a long street on Haotian Island. They found a shop with a sign hanging on it and walked in directly. There were many people inside asking for all kinds of information. Chu Xiu looked around and said faintly, "Do you have a private room?" Yes. A crafty-looking martial artist immediately came forward and flattered Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan into a private room. He only had the strength of the innate realm. Naturally, he couldn't see through Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan's realm. However, in the anemophilia trade, whether it was the Central Plains warriors or overseas, it depended on their eyesight. Anyway, with his eyesight, these two were not ordinary people. "What kind of information do you need?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "All the major news that happened in the cool breeze sea in the past few years." The wind medium said awkwardly, "You're making things difficult for me. The breeze sea is so big, and from our anemophilia's point of view, there are major events happening every day. What level are these major events?" Chu Xiu didn't say anything. He took out an ingot of purple gold and threw it on the table. Seeing that ingot of purple gold, the wind medium's eyes immediately lit up, and he put it into his bosom. He took out a thick book from somewhere and said, "What information do you want?" "I have it here." Purple gold was something that was extremely rare in the outer seas. There were very few purple gold mines in the outer seas. Even if there were, a portion of it was under the sea and it was extremely difficult to mine it. Therefore, the purchasing power of purple gold in the outer seas was much higher than in the Central Plains. Chu Xiu was so generous. He could even find information from 100 years ago, not to mention all the news that happened in the past few years. Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan flipped through the book for a while, and they more or less understood the situation in the outer seas. Compared to the ups and downs of the Central Plains warriors, the outer seas was still relatively peaceful. Wuxia had a great reputation in the outer seas. In addition, he had a few foster sons. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that his supreme island was the supreme island of the outer seas. Everyone else lived under such authority and rules. Naturally, they wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. Yi Buoxuan closed the book and said, "This fifth Master Hua will be celebrating his 380th birthday in a few days. He is also a person who loves to show off and has a lively personality. Every few years he will hold a birthday celebration and call his adopted son as well as all the major powers in the cool breeze sea to come and have a good time. It can be said that this is the time when all the forces in the breezy sea are gathered. On such an occasion, official Chu, if you can get the support of the fifth Lord Hua and gather all the forces in the breezy sea, it might be possible." Hearing what Yi Buoxuan said, Chu Xiu's expression was a little strange. This Wuxia was already 380 years old. There weren't many true fire spirit refinement realm martial artists who could live to this age. In theory, a martial artist in the true fire spirit refinement realm had a lifespan of 400 years, but this was only in theory. Once a martial artist in this realm passed the age of 200, his body would begin to decline. In fact, at 300 years old, one could already feel that they were close to the end of their lifespan. It was already very rare for someone to survive 300 years old and still have the strength to fight, like the Chunyang Dao sect's Mako Mori. This fifth Lord Hua was already close to 400 years old, but he was still able to go through so much trouble. He could be considered to have lived a long life. Yi Buoxuan seemed to have seen through Chu Xiu's doubts. He smiled and said, "Ever since his eldest foster son, Qiu Qianya, became famous, the fifth Lord Hua almost never fought with anyone. Later on he took in 4 foster sons in a row. Do you think he still has the chance to fight with others? Chu Xiu nodded in understanding. This was very reasonable. This 5th Master Hua had lived like a prince for such a long time. With his 5 adopted sons around, he could practically do as he pleased in the entire Cool Breeze Sea. Without the opportunity to fight to the death with others, he naturally did not have as many internal injuries in his body. It was normal for him to have a longer lifespan. However, Chu Xiu still felt a little uncomfortable. He was more sensitive about things like birthday banquets. Generally speaking, as long as he participated in a birthday banquet, it would not end well. He also wondered if he was suffering from the reverse fate of occasions like birthday banquets. However, this time, Chu Xiu was really going to join forces with people from overseas. He was not going to look for trouble. Therefore, Chu Xiu asked the Anemophilia, "Do you know what the 5th Lord Hua likes? What did the major forces of the breezy ocean give him during his birthday banquets?" The Anemophilia smiled bitterly and said, "With the 5th Lord Hua's identity, what rare treasures can't he get? Moreover, the 5th Lord Hua does not devote himself to martial arts. He doesn't care about cultivation manuals and the like. So you stumped me on this. Then how do you give him birthday gifts? Do you just give them randomly?" The Anemophilia shrugged and said helplessly, "Just give them whatever you want. Of course we have to choose the precious ones." In fact, the martial arts forces of the breezy ocean also had some complaints about the 5th Lord Hua holding birthday banquets frequently. Although the 5th Lord Hua said that his birthday banquets were just for everyone to have fun together, even if he did not give gifts, who would dare to refuse? But since the old man said so, who would dare to not give gifts? Moreover, they could not give gifts lightly. If others give expensive gifts, you can give something light, but it also depends on the strength of your sect. Even if a small island owner just gave a calligraphy painting, the 5th Lord Hua would not be picky. But if you, a big island owner, also gave a calligraphy painting, then the 5th Lord Hua would not be happy even if he did not say it. Then you would be out of luck. Everyone is competing with each other to give gifts, and none of the forces dare to hide their gifts. The expenses are not ordinary. Chu Xiu said with a faint smile, "Aren't you afraid that something will go wrong by slandering the 5th Lord Hua here?" The Anemophilia chuckled and said, "The 5th Lord Hua will not care about an ant-like person like me. Moreover, these things are being discussed in the entire breezy ocean, so there is no way we can control them all. But if the 2 of you want to attend the 5th Lord Hua's birthday banquets, you'd better think of a way to get an invitation." Chu Xiu asked doubtfully, "Can't anyone attend the birthday banquets?" "Anyone can attend the birthday banquets, but do the 2 of you know how many forces there are in the entire breezy ocean, and how many lone cultivators there are? On the day of the birthday banquets, the entire Supreme Island will be packed. Most people can only have a banquet outside, and they are not qualified to enter the inner house at all. Only those who have less than 1,000 invitations are qualified to enter the inner house and see the 5th Lord Hua." Chu Xiu knocked on the table and asked, "Then how can I get an invitation?" The Anemophilia said, "There is nothing I can do about that. The invitations are sent to the leaders of the various forces, and no one will sell them. However, one invitation can bring 3 people. Some loose cultivators are alone, so they will help their juniors or directly sell their spots. You can all give it a try." Recently, a great-grandson of the 5th Lord Hua has been giving out invitations on the Haotian Island. You can try your luck there and see if you can get one. Of course, it will be very difficult. The invitations are limited, and even if that person is the great-grandson of the 5th Lord Hua, he won't dare to do anything. Chu Xiu nodded and left with Yi Buxuan. As long as he had some clues, it would be easy to get an invitation. Chu Xiu first went to the place where the great-grandson of the 5th Lord Hua was with Yi Buxuan. The Haotian Island was jointly managed by various forces, and the Supreme Island naturally had a part in it. At the moment, in a house, a young man in a brocade robe was holding a pen and paper, and he was giving out invitations one by one. To be more precise, it was the people who were invited to the birthday party who went up to him to confirm their identities, and then went to him to get the invitations. In the past, it was usually the host's family who came to deliver the invitations, but the great-grandson of the 5th Lord Hua was too lazy to go from house to house, so he stayed on the Haotian Island and called everyone over to get the invitations himself. When someone came, he would cross off the name on the list. It was easy and effortless. But even so, he still reprimanded impatiently, "Hurry up. What are you waiting for? I'm waiting here to give you invitations on such a hot day, and you're still dilly-dallying? Even the old turtle in the sea is faster than you." Hearing that, the faces of the sect leaders and island masters darkened, but they didn't act up. After all, the person was the great-grandson of the fifth Lord Hua, and he was even a direct descendant. It was said that the fifth Lord Hua doted on him, so they couldn't afford to offend him. But seeing this scene, Chu Xiu shook his head. Some powerful island masters were definitely personally sent invitations by the Supreme Island's higher-ups, but the strength of the people present wasn't weak either. At least among those who came to get the invitations, there were many real pellet state, and the weakest was at the unity of man and nature state. But the great-grandson of the fifth Lord Hua was only at the physical invulnerability state. Although with Chu Xiu's current realm, a real pellet state could be easily killed with a slap. But in the eyes of most martial artists, the grandmaster of the real pellet state was already an unattainable existence. In the Central Plains warriors they could establish their own sects, and in the overseas land they could also dominate an island. But now they were humiliated by this young man. This was simply ruining the Supreme Island's reputation. Chapter 1006. Yi Buxuan also saw the behavior of the fifth Lord Hua's great-grandson. He shook his head and said, "The fifth Lord Hua's vision is amazing, but it's a pity that none of his descendants live up to expectations. They are all mediocre, and it's not uncommon for them to have a bad reputation like this. But he still has 5 adopted sons, which is enough to protect the entire Supreme Island." Seeing the appearance of Hua Xingzuan's great-grandson, Chu Xiu was even more curious about the fifth Lord Hua. The other party's vision is simply amazing. He has 5 adopted sons in a row, and each of them is outstanding. But his method of educating his descendants is a bit too mediocre. Looking at his behavior, he is even inferior to those of the 9 great families in the Central Plains. At this moment there was a sudden quarrel outside, and there was even a faint sound of exploding aura. Chu Xiu and Yi Buxuan went out to take a look. It turned out to be 2 real pellet state martial artists fighting fiercely on the street. A group of people around were watching as if they were used to this kind of situation. It should be said that this kind of situation was very common on Haotian Island. This was not the territory of one family, and any disputes could be resolved directly on the island. Of course, both sides had to control the strength of their attacks. Otherwise, if they hurt the innocent, someone would intervene. The 2 real pellet state martial artists who were fighting were one old and one young. The young man looked like he was in his early 30s, and his actual age should be less than 50 years old. His talent was very good. However, he had obviously just stepped into the real pellet state not long ago, and he was inferior to the old man opposite him. He was already at a disadvantage. The young martial artist said hatefully, "Lin Tsung-yip, in the past you were chased by your enemies like a stray dog. It was my father who saved you and let you join the Long Gorge Island. Now that my father is dead, you can't wait to take my Long Gorge Island. Do you have any shame? You're simply unscrupulous." Lin Tsung-yip sneered, "Xiaoziki, don't talk like you are so wronged. After so many years, who is the reason why the Long Gorge Island can grow to such a scale? It's me. You, Mr. Xiao, used the forces I fought for and the resources and elixirs I earned to cultivate behind closed doors. Without me, can you have the strength you have now? Your father saved my life. When he was alive, I regarded him as my master. But now that he is gone, what right do you have to be the island master?" The enmity between these 2 people was very simple. Chu Xiu had already figured it out long ago. It was nothing more than their own families infighting. This Lin Zongye plotted to seize the foundation left behind by Xiaoziki's father. He believed that his contribution was greater than Xiaoziki's, and that the position of island master should belong to him. On the other hand, Ziki thought that he was a traitor to Xiao. Xiao was a traitor too. Actually, both of them were not wrong. Every man for himself, and heaven and earth would destroy him. Who was right and who was wrong when it came to conflicts of interest? Lin Tsung-yip said coldly, "Hand over the invitation. You don't have to go to the fifth Lord Hua's birthday banquet anymore. I'll do it for you." Only the leaders of the major forces were qualified to go to the Supreme Island to celebrate Hua Xingzuan's birthday banquet. This person used to be Xiaoziki's father. Now it was naturally him. Hence, the invitation was given to him. It must be said that Hua Xingzuan's prestige in the breezy ocean had reached a certain level. Even attending his birthday banquet had become a symbol of status. However, Chu Xiu's heart skipped a beat. "An invitation?" Xiaoziki said coldly, "Dream on. Moreover, the Xiao family's name is written on the invitation. Even if you have the invitation, you won't be able to go to the Supreme Island." A strange smile appeared on Lin Zongye's face. "Is that so? but it's very common for the ruler of an island to change. I believe the Hua family will understand. Am I right, young Master Hua? The young master of the Hua family, who had been handing out the invitations in the courtyard, was now standing at the side watching the commotion. Hearing this, he only said lazily, "Old Lin, don't forget to bring me 72 clear dust pearls when you come to the island. If you bring something, I will recognize the invitation. If you don't, even if you bring 100 invitations, it will be useless." When everyone heard this, they immediately knew what was going on. Lin Tsungyip was really well prepared. He had already hooked up with the young master of the Hua family. Although the name of the invitation was wrong, which was against the rules, the disciples of the Supreme Island might not take it seriously since the young master Hua had spoken. At this moment, Xiao Ziqi's heart was filled with despair. Lin Tsungyip had already planned everything. Was the foundation that his father left behind going to be lost just like that? But suddenly a voice was heard. "If I help you get rid of this old man, how about you bring the two of us when you go to the Supreme Island?" Everyone immediately looked at Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan when they heard the voice. Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan naturally wouldn't flaunt their true fire spirit refinement state aura when they went to the island. Instead, they concealed their aura. However, people like Xiao Ziqi and Lin Tsungyip could tell that Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan weren't simple at all, because even they couldn't see through them. Therefore, Xiao Ziqi didn't even consider the background of Chu Xiu and the others. He immediately said, "If the two of you can help me, I'll give you anything you want." His family's business was about to be taken away. As long as the other party didn't want his life, he was willing to give them anything they wanted. Lin Tsungyip squinted his eyes and said, "People of the Central Plains, this is an overseas dispute. It's best that you don't interfere." The clothes that Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan were wearing were very different from those of the overseas martialists. Coupled with their accents, it was easy to tell that they were from the Central Plains. Lin Tsungyip's tone was filled with fear and threat. However, his heart skipped a beat when he saw the look in Chu Xiu's eyes. This was because Chu Xiu's eyes looked as if he was looking at a dead man. Before Lin Tsungyip could speak, Chu Xiu had already used his palm as a blade and slashed out gently. A wisp of black fire condensed in Chu Xiu's blade. It seemed very weak and tiny, and it didn't even emit any energy fluctuations. However, at this moment, the terrifying instinct of being in a life-and-death situation made Lin Tsungyip erupt with all his strength. He even burned his essence and blood to resist the weak black fire. However, this was still in vain. That black flame easily burned through his protective Jin Qi and touched his body. In an instant, his entire body was burned into a pile of ashes, leaving no bones behind. Everyone present suddenly fell into silence. They couldn't believe that a martial arts grandmaster of the real pellet state died so easily in the hands of the opponent. Everyone present couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. Even Yi Buoxuan was the same. He was an old man in the demonic path. He had dealt with both Ming Mo and Yin Mo. Most of the people in the demonic path were paranoid and crazy. No matter what they did, it wasn't too much. Therefore, when Yi Buoxuan first met Chu Xiu, he actually didn't feel that Chu Xiu was a demonic cultivator. Because although Chu Xiu was ruthless, his opponents were all his enemies. Moreover, Chu Xiu didn't have any strange dark hobbies like other demonic cultivators, nor did he rape, pillage, or kill his enemies. But now Yi Buoxuan understood that in the entire demonic path, perhaps he, Chu Xiu, was the person with the deepest demonic nature. Originally, this matter had nothing to do with him. However, because of the invitation, he had jumped out to kill someone. From this, it could be seen what exactly human life represented in Chu Xiu's heart. Perhaps to him, human life was just a tool, a stepping stone. That was the most terrifying thing because you didn't know when you would have a conflict of interest with Chu Xiu one day. At that time, he wouldn't kill you so easily. At this time, in the silence, a discordant voice suddenly sounded, "Hey, you killed old Lin, what about the Ming Qin bead he promised to give me? Are you going to compensate me?" The young master of the Hua family spoke first, and there was even extreme dissatisfaction in his tone. The others might be shocked by Chu Xiu's strength, but he wasn't. Since he was young, he had been surrounded by too many strong cultivators. The foster sons of his ancestors were not easy to deal with. Hearing this voice, Chu Xiu frowned. When he looked over, his eyes seemed to be nurturing a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. It was extremely terrifying. The young master of the Hua family was shocked, and he didn't dare to say another word. But at this time, an old man with the strength of true fire spirit refinement realm walked over from afar. The others all respectfully called him Yu I Feng. This was one of the current managers of Haotian Island. He was a lone cultivator, but his seniority in terms of seniority was very high. Feng didn't say anything. He only released his own aura and said calmly, "When the strong cultivators of the Central Plains come to our East Sea, the people of the East Sea are warm and hospitable, and we will definitely treat them well. However, if they kill people as soon as they come, we don't dare to treat them well even if we want to." As he said that, Feng's body released a powerful pressure that attacked Chu Xiu. However, a powerful pressure that was 10 times or even 100 times stronger than the previous one descended, causing Feng's eyes to bulge. In less than 3 breaths' time he couldn't bear the pressure anymore. He shook his head and said, "There are talented people in every generation. I'm old." After saying that, Feng actually turned around and left. Before he left, he said calmly, "There aren't many rules on Haotian Island. When it comes to personal grievances, death is death. However, don't think that anyone can act recklessly on Haotian Island. The East Sea isn't a place where anyone can act recklessly." Chu Xiu was famous among the Central Plains warriors. However, in the East Sea, or rather in the eyes of a semi-retired martial artist like Feng, he didn't have much of an impression. However, regardless of whether it was the Central Plains or overseas, strength was the best proof of everything. Just that aura alone was enough to make him feel that even if he had been at his peak when he was young, he probably wouldn't have been able to withstand 3 moves from this person before him. Chapter 1007. Strength was the most useful passport no matter where one was. The Haotian Island was loosely managed. The rules might be useful to others, but to people like Chu Xiu they were basically useless. Thus, Elder Feng only left a few pleasantries before disappearing. Even the young master of the Hua family dejectedly returned to continue sending out invitations. He no longer felt the heartache over the clear dust pearl that he had yet to obtain. Xiao Ziki came over and cupped his hands in gratitude. "Thank you, Senior, for helping me get rid of this traitor. I'm very grateful." Chu Xiu waved his hand casually and said, "You don't have to be so polite. It's just a deal. Don't forget what you promised me." Xiao Ziki nodded and said, "Don't worry, I will take the 2 of you to the 5th Lord Hua's birthday celebration in a few days." In fact, Xiao Ziki was also very puzzled. He could see that the 2 of them were experts in the true fire spirit refining realm. There were only a few experts at this level in the overseas region. Why would such people come to the 5th Lord Hua's birthday celebration? Could it be that the 5th Lord Hua's reputation was so great that it could affect the experts in the Central Plains? Although Xiao Ziki was puzzled, he did not ask much. He just invited Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan to wait at his residence. At this time, Yi Buoxuan suddenly asked Chu Xiu through voice transmission, "Official Chu, I don't think there's anything special about this Xiao Ziki. Why did you choose to help him instead of Lin Tsungyip? Is it because you hate traitors, Official Chu?" Yi Buoxuan could see that Chu Xiu had killed someone casually because of the invitation. Therefore it didn't matter who he killed just now. If he helped Lin Tsungyip kill Xiao Ziki, he would still get the invitation. Chu Xiu shook his head gently and said, "I don't hate traitors. In fact, many people in the Jianghu say that I, Chu Xiu, am a traitor. It's not the first time I've betrayed my master. Although I don't hate traitors, I don't want to cooperate with idiots." Lin Tsungyip was too useless. He thought himself clever and was greedy. According to him, he had been in charge of all the affairs of the Long Gorge Island for so many years, while Xiao Ziki only focused on cultivation. Therefore, even if he was not the island lord, his prestige must be higher than Xiao Ziki's. This matter could have been carried out step by step. He could have secretly schemed to make the entire Long Gorge Island fall out with Xiao Ziki and ruin his reputation. Then he would be forced to become the island lord. But in the end, Lin Tsungyip insisted on taking it by force. Obviously he was a greedy and stupid guy. All humans are greedy. I can cooperate with greedy people and I can tolerate greed, but I can't tolerate a greedy idiot. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Yi Buoxuan broke out in a cold sweat. Lin Tsungyip was lucky to have met Xiao Ziki, a guy who only had strength but had no experience in scheming. If he had met Chu Xiu, he would have been cheated until not even his bones were left. Of course, not even his bones were left now. At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out. "I didn't expect to meet the famous official Chu in the East Sea, as well as sect leader Yi Buoxuan of the 6th Demon Sect. What an honor." Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan both looked back in surprise. They didn't expect someone to recognize them in a place like this. The speaker was a middle-aged man in purple with an extraordinary aura. This middle-aged man also had the strength of the true fire spirit refinement realm. His aura was condensed and abnormally dense. Seeing Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan, he greeted them with cupped hands. Every move he made was filled with a sense of grandeur. Before Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan could ask, the man took the initiative and said, "I am Pak Dong Lai. I run some small businesses in the East Sea. It's normal that you haven't heard of me." Yi Buoxuan smiled and said, "Tianyishui Hall Pavilion Master, purple air from the East. Pak Dong Lai is famous. Who doesn't know of him? Moreover, if Tianyishui Hall is only a small business, then all the shops in the East Sea can only be described as street stalls." As Yi Buoxuan said this, he secretly introduced Pak Dong Lai to Chu Xiu. This person was born in the wilderness. In his early years, he brought a few small boats to the Windbreaker Sea in search of treasures and opportunities. After he accumulated some savings, he built Tianyishui Hall on various islands in the East Sea. He sold all kinds of rare treasures, weapons, elixirs, cultivation methods, ancient books, and so on. At the same time, he also bought some resources from rogue cultivators. Because Pak Dong Lai's Tianyishui Hall was fair and honest, even when he bought some items from rogue cultivators, he would try his best to give a higher price. Therefore, in the East Sea, Pak Dong Lai had a good reputation. Moreover, he was a righteous person. If anyone encountered difficulties and asked for help from Tianyishui Hall, as long as it was not too excessive, the Tianyishui Hall on each island would help as much as possible. Although there were some people who took advantage of him, most people were grateful to him. In short, this person was also a big shot in the East Sea. Pak Dong Lai asked, "Both of you are big shots in the Central Plains warriors. May I know why you have come to the East Sea this time?" Chu Xiu smiled and said, "I have long heard of the name of the fifth Lord Hua of the East Sea Supreme Island. This time we have come to congratulate the fifth Lord Hua on his birthday." Pak Dong Lai only smiled and said, "That's great. I will also attend the fifth Lord Hua's birthday. We will see you then. If the two of you don't mind, after the fifth Lord Hua's birthday, you can also come to my Tianyishui Hall as a guest." After exchanging some pleasantries, Pak Dong Lai turned and left. After Pak Dong Lai left, Yi Buoxuan asked, "Official Chu, what do you think of this person?" Chu Xiu said calmly, "He seems to be generous and forthright, but in fact he is very thoughtful and knows his limits." They were both experienced and astute people. Pak Dong Lai might be able to deceive others, but he could not deceive Chu Xiu. Since the other party knew them, he should have noticed Chu Xiu when Chu Xiu stood out to kill people. In the end, he only came out after Chu Xiu killed the people and Feng was scared away. He pretended to be surprised and did not want to get involved in trouble. Moreover, Chu Xiu said that he had only come to celebrate the fifth Lord Hua's birthday. Even an idiot would not believe him. If Pak Dong Lai was really generous and forthright, he would definitely flick his sleeves and leave on the spot. However, he seemed to really believe it and did not even say a word of doubt. Moreover, he could also guess that Chu Xiu was wary of him. Therefore, after exchanging a few pleasantries, he turned around and left. He did not continue to be entangled here. That was why Chu Xiu said that he knew his limits. Yi Buoxuan said with a smile, "Pak Dong Lai has a good reputation in this area of the Breeze Sea. I don't think many people will believe what you said about him." Chu Xiu said expressionlessly, "Those who really believe in it are either those inexperienced youths or they're really stupid. Pak Dong Lai has such strength now and his Tianyishui Hall has such influence now. If this person is not scheming enough, I'm afraid he would have been tricked to death long ago." Although that was what he said, Chu Xiu did not care about Pak Dong Lai. He did not have any enmity towards Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan. He was just curious and testing them out. He wanted to make friends with them. The two of them were big shots among the Central Plains warriors. In particular, Chu Xiu had suddenly come to the East Sea. As long as someone recognized them, it would definitely arouse suspicion. Therefore, it was not strange for Pak Dong Lai to test them out. Moreover, for people like Pak Dong Lai, networking and other things had almost become a habit. When he met Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan, two experts who did not have a direct conflict of interest with him, he subconsciously wanted to get to know them. Even if he could not help him, it was still good to have such connections. The two of them followed Xiao Ziki to his residence on Haotian Island. A few days later, when the birthday of the fifth Lord Hua began, they were ready to leave. During this period of time, Xiao Ziki had indeed suspected that Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan insisted on attending the birthday of the fifth Lord Hua. He wondered if they had ulterior motives and whether they would implicate him. However, Xiao Ziki dared not ask or say these things. If it were not for Chu Xiu, his foundation would have been occupied by Lin Tsungyip. Of course, the most important thing was that based on how easily Chu Xiu killed Lin Tsungyip as if he was crushing an ant, Xiao Ziki had no doubt that he would end up the same if he did anything. Before Xiao Ziki reached the real pellet state, his father told him that as long as he broke through to the real pellet state, he could become the overlord of an island. Now that he had reached the real pellet state, he found that in the face of a powerhouse like Chu Xiu, the real pellet state was just a slightly stronger ant. This truth even made Xiao Ziki lose his mind for a while. The big ship was approaching the Supreme Island, and there were many ships heading towards the Supreme Island. They were obviously preparing to celebrate the birthday of the fifth Lord Hua. After going ashore, Chu Xiu also sized up the Supreme Island. The Supreme Island wasn't too big, but the scenery was beautiful, and the chi of heaven and earth was extremely abundant. Could be said to be a treasure land. The buildings on the island were extremely luxurious. In Chu Xiu's opinion, they were even more luxurious than the northern Yen. The building in the center of the island was no longer a house, but a small palace. With Xiao Ziki carrying the invitation, it was easy to enter the palace. However, at this time, Chu Xiu and the others didn't notice that there were several pairs of eyes watching them from the other side of the palace. The young master of the Hua family that Chu Xiu had met before was standing there. There were two other people standing beside him. One of them was dressed in battle armor and had a ferocious and fierce appearance. He gave off an intimidating feeling without being angry. There was another person who was even stranger. He was actually sitting cross-legged in the air, completely supported by his stellar energy. However, upon closer inspection, one would discover that he was not maintaining such a strange posture. Instead, it was because he did not have legs. Chapter 1008. The people who were secretly observing Chu Xiu and the others were none other than Hua Xingzuan's second foster son, Bailey Pobing, the owner of Divine Weapon Island, and his fourth foster son, Naylan Hai. Bailey Pobing grabbed the Hua family's young master and brought him in front of him. He asked loudly, "Kid, you're saying that these two fellows deliberately killed people in order to attend foster father's birthday celebration? That's how they obtained the invitation?" Young Master Hua nodded and said, "That's right, it's the two of them. They seem to be some big shots of the Central Plains warriors." Bailey Pobing turned his gaze to Naylan Hai and asked, "The fourth prince, you usually like to study these messy news. You should know the Central Plains warriors the best. What's the background of these two fellas? Foster father's birthday is such a joyous occasion, we can't let them disturb it." Naylan Hai's appearance was that of a young man with a pale face. His hair was disheveled, but the gloominess in his eyes did not dissipate no matter what. The fifth Lord Hua's foster sons were all dragons and phoenixes among men. Naylan Hai used to be one, but now he was a crippled dragon and phoenixes among men. Kang Dongming's strength was almost invincible among those below the heaven and earth mysterious realm. He was so powerful that it made people feel hopeless. Even if the fifth Lord Hua's foster sons attacked him together, they might not be able to defeat him. Moreover, the fifth Lord Hua's foster sons each had their own thoughts. They were all the fifth Lord Hua's foster sons, but they were not brothers. For example, Zhao Yuanfeng knew that Kang Dongming had injured him, but he still dared to use Kang Dongming as his follower. Among the fifth Lord Hua's foster sons, he was only close to Bailey Pobing. The young Master Hua glanced at Naylan Hai cautiously. Of course, the fifth Lord Hua's foster sons were all people he could not afford to offend. The fifth Lord Hua treated them better than his own sons. However, young Master Hua was not afraid of the ferocious Bailey Pobing. Instead, he was afraid of the taciturn Naylan Hai. Hearing this, Naylan Hai said indifferently, "Strictly speaking, the one in the black robe and mask is not a martial artist from the Central Plains. He is the leader of the 6th demon sect in the South China Sea Bushuan. As for that young man, if I'm not mistaken, he should be the strongest person in the Yinma clan on the surface. He is also its leader, the leader of the subduing martial hall, Chu Xiu. He is definitely a big shot in the Central Plains warriors. He is in charge of the Yinma clan, and all the forces in the northern Yen martial world regard him as the supreme leader. Although he is not the leader of the Guanzhong torture room in name, he is his puppet. One of the four spirits, the former leader of the Blue Dragon Society, Bu Tianan, was killed. In the end, the Blue Dragon Society did not avenge him. Instead, it was controlled by the murderer. The information that Naylan Hai said was not new to the Central Plains warriors. Almost everyone knew about it. However, it was not easy to have such detailed information about Chu Xiu in the overseas area. Bailey Pobing was speechless. He said, "This guy has such a powerful background. The Yinma clan is not worried at all. How could they hand over such a big foundation to such a young man?" Naylan Hai squinted his eyes and said, "In the Jianghu, apart from distinguishing one's seniority, Is there any other meaning to age? As long as one is powerful enough, what foundation can't he get? The fourth prince, I think this guy is up to no good when he comes to celebrate his godfather's birthday. He is a big shot of the devil path in the Central Plains. What is he doing in the East Sea? Anyway, none of the warriors in the Central Plains are good people. How about this, before the birthday celebration starts, I will find a reason to kick him out. In the past, before Bailey Pobbing became the fifth Lord Hua's adopted son, he had gone to the Central Plains to make a living. No one knew what happened at that time. However, it was said that Bailey Pobbing suffered a great loss. Therefore, as long as he met warriors from the Central Plains, even if they did not provoke him, they would be easily beaten up by him. Nayland Hai glanced at him and said, "This is my godfather's birthday celebration. He hasn't done anything yet. What are you so anxious about? If you act rashly, the one who will be kicked out might not be Chu Xiu but you. Keep an eye on him and observe the situation. Remember, this is the outer endless sea, the supreme island. This is our territory, not Chu Xiu's." Although that was what Nayland Hai said, he still had doubts in his heart. He remembered that Eastern Qi had already started to attack the Northern Yan. This Chu Xiu had close relations with the Northern Yan royalty. Even the Northern Yan royalty was helped onto the throne by him. Did he come to the East Sea have something to do with this? At that moment, Chu Xiu had already followed Xiao Ziki into the hall. It was an extraordinarily gorgeous hall, with tables and seats placed around it. However, Xiao Ziki was in a dilemma. There were only a limited number of true fire spirit refinement state experts in the breezy sea. Therefore, there were also a limited number of seats at the front that were specially prepared for true fire spirit refinement state experts. With Xiao Ziki's strength and influence, he could only sit in the middle. However, Chu Xiu and Yi Buixuan were genuine true fire spirit refinement state experts. Did they have to sit with him? Fortunately, this time Chu Xiu was here to find someone to work with and not to look for trouble. Therefore, he did not argue over a seat. He simply said, "Sit down." About an hour later, the hall was filled with people. There were 5 seats at the front, but only 3 people were seated. Those 5 seats were naturally reserved for Hua Xingzuan's 5 adopted sons. Even his own sons did not have this kind of treatment. The first seat was already empty. It was reserved for his eldest son, Qiu Tianya. Although Qiu Tianya had been missing for 50 years, he still had a seat at Hua Xingzuan's birthday celebration. The second seat was the island master of Divine Weapon Island, Bailey Pobbing. For some reason, Chu Xiu always felt that Bailey Pobbing was looking at him. The third seat was the master of the Blue Dragon Fleet, Fu Longxiao. This person wore a brocade robe with dragon patterns and had an imposing appearance. He was also the strongest among the 3. The fourth seat was Nayland Hai. However, he always had a kind of unapproachable aura which made people fear him. The fifth seat was also empty now. This seat was naturally reserved for Zhao Yuanfeng. At this moment, a loud voice came from outside, "The fifth lord is here." As the voice came, an old man with white hair and beard, dressed in luxurious clothes, walked into the hall surrounded by a group of children and grandchildren. Hearing this voice, everyone present turned their eyes to the fifth Lord Hua. Even Chu Xiu's eyes were attracted. He was really curious about who this fifth Lord Hua was. His eyesight could actually reach such a level. However, at first glance, Chu Xiu was a little disappointed. Ordinary to ordinary. For most martial artists, not to mention the true fire spirit refinement state, even the real pellet state was something that could only be encountered by chance. However, in the eyes of people at Chu Xiu's level, there were also differences in the true fire spirit refinement state. The Sun family's ancestor and the Liu family's ancestor who died in his hands before belonged to the mediocre type. Not long ago in the Guangzhong torture room, Mako Mori, Nangong Weiyu and Helian Changfeng were all defeated by him, but it was not because he was too weak, but because Chu Xiu was too strong. Individually, the 3 of them were not easy to deal with. On Hua Xingzuan, Chu Xiu did not see too many anomalies. On the contrary, in his opinion, this Hua Xingzuan was even a little weak. There was not much evil aura on his body, which proved that he had not fought with others for a long time. Even when his combat power was at its peak, he rarely fought with others, so his combat power should not be high. Moreover, Hua Xingzuan's body exuded an extremely strong aura. It was so strong that it was a little abnormal. This proved that he often used various elixirs and natural treasures as tonics, and the tonics were a little too much, even to the point that it was emitted through his aura. Also, the aura around his body was different from the ordinary true fire spirit refinement state martial artists. True fire spirit refinement state used the power of the spirit to trigger the power of heaven and earth. Every move was in line with the power of heaven and earth. This was a subconscious move. For example, if it was raining now, the existence of true fire spirit refinement state like Chu Xiu, even if he didn't use true qi to block the raindrops would involuntarily deviate and avoid them. However, the aura around Hua Xingzuan's body was very chaotic, as if he couldn't control this power at all. Could it be that even the power of the true fire spirit refinement realm was obtained from an external object? But what external objects could allow someone to step into true fire spirit refinement state? While Chu Xiu was thinking, Hua Xingzuan had already walked to the main seat and sat down. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Time passes really quickly. I didn't expect that in the blink of an eye, I would already be 380 years old. This birthday. Every time we celebrate it, we get older. In a few more years, perhaps everyone will have to attend Ai's funeral." Someone immediately said, "What are you talking about, Fifth Lord? The Eastern Sea is fortunate to have the protection of the Fifth Lord. The Fifth Lord will definitely live on for tens of thousands of years." That's right. All these years, the Fifth Lord has blessed the Eastern Sea. How could the heavens let the Fifth Lord leave just like that? The Fifth Lord will definitely have a long life of good fortune. A series of flattering words came from the audience. They sounded very mushy, but everyone knew that the Fifth Lord Hua actually loved to hear such words. When people get old, they all fear death, and Hua Xingzuan was even more so. Although he kept saying that he didn't have long to live, if someone said those unlucky words in front of him, he would be very unhappy. Waving his hand, Hua Xingzuan said with a smile, all right, I have already been blessed by the heavens for being able to live until now. If I continue living, I will really become an old man. Originally, I didn't plan to celebrate this birthday, and plan to celebrate it when I'm 388 years old. However, I'm afraid that I won't be able to see all of you after another 8 years. Therefore, I brought it forward a little so that I can have some fun with all of you. At this time, the third son of Hua Xingzuan, Fu Longxiao, was the first to step forward. He bowed and said, "Don't worry, foster father. After 8 years, I will definitely hold an even bigger birthday banquet for you, and invite some of the powerful experts in the windbreaking sea." This time, I went to the windbreaking sea and brought back a sea bodhi. The fruit it bore was actually a longevity peach. Clearly, the heavens are preparing a congratulatory gift for you, foster father. With that, Fu Longxiao waved his hand and ordered someone to bring the congratulatory gift. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu clearly noticed that Bailey Pobbing and Nalen Hai's expressions had turned gloomy. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.